When the girl was born, the entire sky whispered her name, sending her blessings. The supreme god said to her, "You are the strongest shield, the unbreakable wall. You will use your wisdom and strength to protect the world. You are the embodiment of justice. You are a knight. You are a princess. You will use your power carefully to obtain victory. I am proud to see you grow up, and I believe that the victory will belong to you. One day, you will reach the end and be crowned king. Now fight for me, my Iron Knight." The girl raised her large shield and swore to her god, "I will go forward bravely. I will continue to improve myself. I will defend my territory and my people. I am a knight, a king, and I will carry out my mission." The god gave the girl the strongest shield, the hardest silver armor, waiting for the enemy's coming. The girl could feel the overflowing power in her body, which was God's blessing and her belief. "Come on, I'm not afraid." The girl stood on her own position with the shield and showed her unmatched perseverance. Then the girl saw the monster. Covered by black glow, a foreign body pierced through the starry sky and descended into the world. First, the large shield broke in the girl's hands. Once, 2, 3, 4, 5. This large shield was even taller than the girl's height, sheltered the girl 5 times, constantly pushing the black energy away and guarding the pure girl. Until 5 black energy beams shot on the shield, it finally broke apart. God bless. Instead of yielding, the girl drew out her holy sword and bravely resisted the black aggressor. A halo of energy spread out under her feet, which was the holy halo with multiple buffs such as tenacity, hegemony, thorns, and purification. It was God's gift for the girl. Once again, the girl blocked dozens of the black foreign body's attacks, but the black foreign body's tentacles were increasing. By now, the girl was facing a 64-fold attacking frequency. No matter how many times she cut off the tentacles, they would continue to grow up. The girl's resistance was being weakened little by little. This wasn't because the girl's will had become weak, but because there was a huge contrast between the strength of the two sides. Finally, when the 8th black tentacle appeared, the girl's sword was swept away. She lost her final weapon. The glow of the halo under her feet had become so weak that it would be extinguished at any time, anywhere, like a candle in a storm. The 8 tentacles tore apart the halo and began to penetrate into the crevices of the girl's silver armor, tearing it apart from the girl's body violently. The girl struggled desperately, never yielding to the ravages of the black foreign body. 8 black tentacles mercilessly suppressed the girl's resistance and destroyed all her defenses. Soon, the girl's snow-white skin, slender legs, and delicate feet were all covered by the 8 black tentacles, and they were still moving deeper. The girl had to start praying to her god. "Lord God, give me the power of miracles." "No way." Alpha looked at the Iron Maiden on the chessboard, who had been pierced through by Yuan-Shi's 8 chess pieces with a helpless look. She also wanted to create miracles, but there was no way. Her chess pieces could increase 10% of their defense power every turn, but Yuan-Shi's chess pieces could increase 100% attack power per turn. How could she block his attack? "Why are you so strong?" It was like her Iron Maiden was wearing paper armor in the face of Yuan-Shi's attack. Even she herself felt embarrassed looking at the chessboard. "Stop. It's not a fair duel at all." Alpha had to concede. She even started to doubt if this formalized series of moves she created was really useful. "Actually, I can only double my attack power one more time." Yuan-Shi looked ashamedly at Alpha, who seemed to have lost her self-confidence. In this game, he could only create at most 9 attacks from different directions. Well, he named this formalized series of moves Hydra. Non-opal attacks? Alpha stared at Yuan-Shi. "Are you kidding me? By using my legend-ranked computing power, I could only create the Iron Maiden, which could increase its defense power 10% per turn. Now, you told me that your attack could increase 100% for 9 times? Poor Iron Maiden. What a despairing and misfortunate situation she encountered. As her creator, Alpha couldn't stand this anymore. She could only give up. The moment Alpha conceded, countless Star Go players watched this scene in silence. Among them, There were top-ranked players such as the Three Goddesses and Orphina the Ruby Dragon. There were also newbies who had just started to learn Star Go. But whoever they were all shocked by the power displayed by the Master of Star Go. Even if Norn, the God of Wisdom, the Three Goddesses observed Alpha's Iron Maiden from past, present, and future, they couldn't find any flaws. Never before had such a formalized series of moves for defense existed. It was the crystallization of Alpha's wisdom and the trump card created by gathering all the computing power of all planet quadrant computers. However, such a powerful Iron Maiden only defended for 8 turns under the Master of Star Go's fierce attack and was completely defeated. Is it my imagination? Has this bastard's Star Go strength increased again? Skuld gritted her teeth and looked at that hateful code name, a cloud in the sky. Everything has a reason. It's not your imagination, Skuld. Verdanti shook her head. How strong is he? What a monster. Ord looked at the chessboard. She just imagined what they could do in the face of such a fierce attack, and her legs started to shake. It must be an unimaginably horrible experience to be torn apart by that huge, black thing. Cassina. My Cassina is the best. After witnessing this, Orphina again made up her mind to meet her best friend and lover right away. Cassina. No, I don't know anything about that. That's the power of the Master of Star Go. Terrible offensive force. Alpha was crushed. Incredible. I don't mind being crushed. I'm willing to play Star Go with the Master of Star Go at all cost. All Star Go players looked up at the name on the top of the display panel and exclaimed, "Cool. This was a legendary duel. What is the real identity of the Master of Star Go? Even Alpha can't fight against him. We can actually play Star Go in this way." Newbie's eyes brightened up. Most of them had challenged Alpha and understood her crushing power. Before they witnessed this duel, it was hard for them to imagine that someone could defeat Alpha easily. Iron Maiden vs Hydra. Invincible Alpha vs the Master of Star Go. The Master of Star Go's 101st game was recorded by all of them. In this era, only Alpha was qualified to play with the Master of Star Go. Other people were far away from touching the edge of their Star Go strength. Only through Alpha, people could witness a corner of the Master of Star Go's real strength. Just like his code name, a cloud in the sky, his whole person was shrouded in a heavy fog that everyone wanted to see through. I've decided. I must obtain the qualification to challenge the Master of Star Go. I've found a career that I can devote my whole life to. Countless legend-ranked beings and hero-ranked beings watched the duel from the beginning to the end, and they were obsessed with it. To hero-ranked beings, Star Go gave them a glimpse of the higher realm, which was a world full of infinite changes and secrets. To legend-ranked beings, the starry sky chessboard was one of the few places that still contained endless profound mysteries that they didn't understand and wanted to study. In the past, the starry sky chessboard seldom appeared in the Seven Towers. Only a very few wise men had the qualifications to study and play Star Go. Now, because of Yun Shi, the starry sky chessboard was open to all beings who could enter the Seven Towers. Finally, countless hero-ranked beings and legend-ranked beings had the chance to research its mysteries. Just as Alpha's birth to the Mechanist God's domain, the starry sky chessboard would definitely create a new era in the Endless God's domain. Many Star Go veterans had begun to teach students outside of the towers. Just as a spark could start a prairie fire, these players were spreading this game to the Endless God's domains. Unlike the Battle Gods Championship contest, which inevitably caused countless killed and wounded, people wouldn't get hurt on the starry sky chessboard, but could practice their own mentalities there and had a better chance to comprehend the rules of stars. In the Endless God's domains, no one could refuse such a great temptation. This was just the beginning of the glorious era of Star Go. People would forever remember the name of the legend that opened this era. At this moment, he was standing on the top of the cloud in the world, looking down at everyone. Chapter 602, Hydra's Gift, 1. On the Starry Sky Chessboard. I win. Yun Shi let out a sigh of relief, although he still didn't know what a great impact he had caused in the Endless God's domains. Sure enough, playing Star Go is very enjoyable. As long as he was standing in front of the chessboard, He always had endless ideas and all kinds of inspiration, bursting out with dazzling sparks of thinking from time to time. Well, maybe he really had some talent in Stargo. I lost. Alpha bit a strand of her hair and looked at you and she with an unwilling look. After preparing for such a long time, she still failed, as if all her efforts before were just wasting her time. One more time. Just one game. Let's play the game once more. Just as the newbies who encountered Alpha, although she knew she had no chance to win, she still had no intention of giving up. Her face looked like a little girl who had been robbed of her lollipop. She wanted to bet everything on herself to catch the smallest chance to win. In the endless gods' domains, there was only one person who could let her have this emotion, and she would only show this lovely appearance in front of one person. Even though the countless programmatic calculations had let her know that she had no chance of winning no matter how many times she tried. She felt as if the master of Stargo was in a higher dimension, where she could see but could never touch. However, she just didn't know what give up was. Well, Yoon, she smiled bitterly and looked at Alpha's grudging face. What should I do this time? Play one more time with me, and you can ask for anything in the Mechanist God's domain from me. The planet quadrant computers all like you. Do you want to take them away? At the critical moment, Alpha used her children as chips without hesitation. They are very useful. No matter in the real world or in the world of quantum network, they can forever be with you. Yoon, she subconsciously looked at the planet quadrant computers, who were still in direct connection with him and having a nice dream. Why did things develop to this point? As their god, don't you sell your subordinates too easily? Just as Yoon, she was going to say something, the scene in his eyes suddenly began to shake. Numerous doors appeared in front of Yoon Shi, just like what he saw when he first came to the Mechanist God's domain. No. Stay here and play Stargo with me. Alpha showed an unusual expression of unwillingness and regret, watching Yoon Shi's figure disappeared from the starry sky chessboard with her eyes opened wide. Gee, what's wrong with me? Awakened from her dream, Eternal Green quickly and shamefully covered her naked body with her arms. Oh, big brother, don't lick that place. It's dirty there. Eternal Red's little body curled up and her tender skin was covered by a layer of attractive pink. Eternal Blue's body shivered with her feet together. No way. I'm exhausted. Eternal Gold and Eternal Silver were exhausted and toppled down to the ground. They still held each other's hands tightly. The figure of that person left in all their hearts, leaving an indelible mark in their minds that they would never forget. I was so stupid. If I can figure out who he is early, then I can play longer with him. Alpha was also in a complex state, mixed with extreme excitement and regret. Numerous doors opened in front of Yoon Shi, and then a familiar landscape slowly unfolded in front of him. Welcome back, my bride. Have you had a good dream? Hydra's little hand stretched out from the door and brought Yoon Shi's consciousness back to the water god's world from the Mechanist God's domain that was thousands of light years away from here. Was it a dream? Yoon Shi muttered to himself. Was it a dream or a nightmare? Even he himself wasn't sure about it. Well, there is another god's smell on your body. This smell. It's the smell of a newborn god. Let me erase it for you. Hydra embraced Yoon Shi in her arms, then gently stretched out her tongue and licked Yoon Shi's body bit by bit, from fingertips to toes, from knee to abdomen, every corner, every cell of skin, leaving not even the smallest part untouched. This was Hydra's special method to show her intimacy. Gee, wait a minute. Master Water God. No, not that place. Yoon Shi just came back and was not ready for it. What's more, why is Hydra's tongue so soft and warm? No man can endure this temptation. Well, goo. You are my loveliest bride. Of course I'd better. Love you. It tastes good. Hydra made vague sounds as the tip of her tongue moved slowly. She looked at Yoon Shi fondly and said, Lick all over your body for the person you like is the etiquette of a fantastic creature, lady. Don't you know that? Why should I know? Who taught you that etiquette? Under the water, a streak of green light was becoming brighter. Chapter 603. Hydra's Gift 2. The entire lake was getting hot, and that was the breath that some force released after being constantly suppressed. Hydra smiled slightly and tapped her snow-white feet gently on the surface of the lake. Let the baby bird sleep a little while longer. When countless green lights rippled on the surface of the water, the roiled water once again restored to calm. But the high-erected hair firmly remembered its anger at this moment, almost turning into a turquoise blade. From top to bottom, from bottom to top, the small tongue licked Yuanshi's body clean, and removed all the marks left by Alpha on Yuanshi's body. In this process, Yuanshi naturally enjoyed heaven-like happiness. Hydra's tongue was far softer than any woman he had ever known and seemed to know every detail of his body. That feeling, it was as if she had seen Yuanshi's body countless times and touched every inch of his skin a long time ago. My lovely bride. Hydra held Yuanshi's head with her soft voice rippled in his ears. What did you see behind the door? It's a strange world, a newborn god. Yuanshi searched his vague memory and told her his experience in the mechanist god's domain. He didn't know the reason, but as long as he stayed beside Hydra, she would naturally put his heart at rest. This embrace was so warm that both heartbeats unconsciously became the same rhythm. You could feel the most doors when you first drank my wine. Maybe you have a special relationship with that newborn god. Hydra bit Yuanshi's ear lightly, but be careful. This newborn god has a different smell from other gods. She seems to be very, very interested in you, trying to stain you with her smell. It won't disappear even across tens of millions of light years. It's a mark that can be used to find your position. Oh no, did Alpha leave that stuff on me? When did she leave her smell? Yuanshi was completely unaware of it. Of course, it was the time when their minds connected directly. Don't worry. Her smell has been removed and covered by me. Don't be so careless next time. Gods are very persistent creatures. Hydra licked Yuanshi's earlobe. After becoming immortal, most gods would become very indifferent. Compared to the infinite lives of gods, short-lived races couldn't attract their attention at all, as humans wouldn't pay attention to mayflies. However, on the contrary, once the gods looked at a creature, they would inevitably leave a deep impression on the creature. Alpha's impression to Yuanshi wasn't only deep, but regarded him as her enemy of life. Do you like my wine? Hydra approached Yuanshi and looked at his blushed face with interest. Such a lovely and touching look. How beautiful, like a gift from heaven. On that day, when she noticed that an outsider had come to this self-enclosed world, she immediately liked him. Maybe it was too exaggerated to describe it as fall in love at first sight, but she did smell fate from him. With his moves in the world, she gazed at him more and more frequently, and her consciousness also gradually recovered little by little. He did not know where she came from and what she was, but simply followed the beliefs in his heart to protect the world that was doomed to perish. Even Hydra herself wasn't optimistic about this world's future. Originally, the vast majority of the creatures living in this world would have perished, and she had seen this future many years ago. Because of this, she began to consciously reserve the world's original creatures like sailing jellyfish, ready to nurture the creatures who once lived in this world once again after the world was destroyed. Even though she was a god, she knew that it would be a very long process, and the dead creatures wouldn't be revived. Even if the new lives looked the same as the lives in her memory, they wouldn't have the same memory. However, Yuanshi changed that future. Even if everyone thought that he was wrong, he never gave up hope and tried his best to create miracles. In the dying world, he was just like the most beautiful gemstone, the most brilliant lights, so charming and exciting in the gray world. Ah, that's it. That's fate. He was the person she had been waiting for. He was the person she saw in her dream. The future she lost, the end she saw in her sleep, would be changed by him. As long as she was by his side, everything would become possible. Even if the opponent was Shea Longness, he could create miracles. She stretched out her arms and hugged him, put her lips on his lips and kissed him. Well, gods are all very self-willed. Woo. Kissing on Hydra's soft and fragrant lips, Yuanshi felt something cold, fragrant and soft had been sent into his mouth. Hydra's tongue was intertwined with his tongue, melting it bit by bit into Yuanshi's body. Between their lips and tongues, transparent silk threads spread little by little. A hot and fragrant smell began to spread from Yunshi's mouth. The water bed under their feet began to dissolve rapidly, and the emerald green water rippled out, one circle after another. Is that over? On the beach not far away from the Sword Palace, Yunshi looked sadly at the undulating sea, where the crashing sound of waves echoed in his ears. In his mouth, there seemed still to be the unique fragrance of Hydra's wine, as well as the smell of her warm, soft body. It seemed that he drank another glass of Hydra's poisonous wine. The poisonous liquor that could poison millions of people to death was passed into his mouth and spread all over his body. Very hot, very hot, very fragrant, very fragrant, very soft, very soft. Hydra licked every corner of his body. Likewise, Hydra didn't escape from his devil's talons. After drinking the cross-cupped wine, it is the time for the wedding night? Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Hydra indeed let him enjoy her soft and touching body, but it seemed that this body wasn't Hydra's true body. In the end, Hydra let him eat her. Yes, he literally ate her. Her body made of water slipped into his mouth. Oh, the taste of Hydra's body was the taste of wine. Her body was made of wine. Closing his eyes, Yunshi found that besides the water god's crown, sailing jellyfish's robe, and white emperor's mask, there was one more thing that was stocked in his mind. Hydra's wine storage, which stored the wine that Hydra had brewed since the era of the gods. Even in the endless gods' domains, they were the highest-ranking wines. Currently, Yunshi could take out 3 glasses of wines from Hydra's wine storage every day. It was the present Hydra prepared for her bride. My lovely bride, are you satisfied with this gift? The wine is good, but you can't be too fond of drink, by Hydra. This is Hydra's wine storage? Yunshi looked at the small glass that suddenly appeared in his palm. It was the one Hydra had used to drink with him. With a gentle shake, Yunshi seemed to hear the sound of the vast amount of wine stored in this glass, which was about half of the total Hydra's inventories. That was to say, Hydra gave Yunshi half of the poisonous wine she had brewed since the time of the gods as a betrothal. Goo, even Yunshi, who didn't drink much, knew the preciousness of this present, which was enough to buy 100 small sword domains like the White Lotus sword domain. It was an artifact tailored for him. Do you like my present, my lovely bride? In the water god's world, at the bottom of the lake, an emerald green glass, which looked the same as the glass in Yunshi's hand, was emitting a soft and happy light. This gift is too valuable. Yunshi looked at the glass in his hand, which was probably the most precious treasure he had apart from the light furnace he obtained from the Golden Sun Crow Princess. Hydra spent thousands of years brewing the wine. Even his teacher Cassina and Ouroboros would be crazy to steal them. Now, Hydra directly sent him half of her wine. Although the glass was light, Yunshi still felt heavy. Even gods would fight for it if they knew of its existence. At least, if his teacher Cassina knew about it, she would definitely be willing to fight for it. So, do other gods or fantastic creatures also like to drink? Even if he thought by using his toes, he knew that the answer couldn't be unfavorable. If anybody knew of its existence, I will be done for. Yunshi looked at the glass in his hand and decided to keep this a secret forever. But deep in his mind, he was moved. It seems that Hydra really regards him as her most precious bride. I just wanted to accomplish the task at that time. Yunshi took up the glass and sighed. Great will of the stars, what kind of road do you want to show me? I always feel that I am stepping on more and more boats. Oh, I hope that it was just a delusion. If Huahua knows about it. Yunshi looked at Huahua, who was having a sweet dream beside him, and had a very ominous presentiment. Fortunately, when he and Hydra did this thing and that thing in the lake, Huahua didn't wake up. Huahua, I'm sorry, I made another mistake. Yunshi didn't know how many times he had apologized to Huahua, but the meaning of this apology was different from that of any other time in the past. A strand of hair raised high above Yunshi's head as if it was saying, if apologies work, what do you want me to do? MMPHM? Huahua slowly opened her eyes, and then found that her jealousy radar seemed to be broken, constantly rolling around above her head. There is only her little she besides her, Why is the radar sending alerts? Good morning, Hua Hua. Yun, she said with guilt, watching his childhood sweetheart stretching herself. After a few blinks, she regained her vitality. A drop of cold sweat slowly slid down his forehead. Good morning, little she. A new day has begun. Hua Hua smiled and stretched out her hands to the rising sun. Ah, the world is so beautiful. Although she vaguely felt that a lot of things had happened, none of them troubled her now, because her little she had come back. No matter how many mistakes he had made, she would forgive him. As long as he was by her side, she would have the courage to fight the whole world. Kala, Kala. After waking up, Hua Hua felt that her whole body was full of strength. Undoubtedly, she had become stronger again. Not the strength she obtained after releasing the power contained in her bloodline, but the real strength belonged to her own flesh and blood. Her sky-flying bloodline was gradually being unlocked. The title of hero rank was meaningless for her. Neither she needed god weapons to increase her attack power, because she herself was as strong as a god weapon that could unleash destructive forces at any time and anywhere. Very well. I'm in perfect condition. Hua Hua only felt that she could slaughter 100 male fiery dragons now. Little she, did that poisonous snake do anything strange to you? Summoning her broken sword and tightly holding it in her hand, Hua Hua took a deep breath. It's a pity that she didn't kill that cunning snake, Ouroboros. No, Yun, she said cautiously. Yes, he didn't do this thing, and that thing with Ouroboros, but Hydra. That's good. This snake is on my hunting list. Holding the blood-colored sword in her hand, a gust of air suddenly burst out of her body with an overbearing atmosphere. Like a dragon, like a storm, like a natural disaster. She brandished her sword. As a result, an airwave directly divided the sea in front of Hua Hua and extended to the end of the horizon. The strong airflow caused by the sword was perfectly confined within an area of about 10 meters, as if someone was drawing a line on the sea. The sword divided the sea. It represented that Hua was control of her strength went a step further. Yun, she gazed at his childhood sweetheart. The more he knew about her, the more he could understand how exaggerated her talent was. Even in night novels, the protagonists wouldn't be as strong as her. Little she, I become stronger. Apparently, Hua Hua was in a good mood. Her little she was beside her, and his eyes were full of longing as usual. Yeah, she liked his simple and straightforward look. She liked his eyes, which were so pure that couldn't hide anything. It was just that her jealousy radar was a little strange today. It had been spinning around above her head since before she awoke. What's the matter? There were only Yun, she, and herself here. Why was it sending alerts? Congratulations, Hua Hua. Why don't you enter the hero rank? Yun, she looked at his young childhood sweetheart with some doubts. Unlike him, Hua Hua's battle power had long surpassed the hero rank. He didn't think that there would be any hero-ranked beings who could hurt Ouroboros, a legend-ranked fantastic creature. It's still not the time, but it should be soon. Hua Hua shook her head. She couldn't explain it to her little she. There were too many taboos in the sky-flying bloodline. Well, come and eat bread. Yun, she reached out his hand and a piece of fragrant, soft golden bread appeared in his palm. Haha, you're already a hero-ranked baker now. You entered the hero rank faster than me. My little she is the best baker. Hua Hua graciously took away Yun Shi's special golden bread, which was her favorite. In order to gain the privilege of monopolizing this bread, she fought with Yun Shi's other childhood sweethearts and finally defeated them by relying on the strength of her bloodline. For her, Yun Shi's bread had that value. But even after entering the hero rank, a baker's battle power is still 0. Yun Shi was satisfied with his career level, but he was not proud of it. Compared with Hua Hua, Red Lotus, and White Lotus, his hero rank as a baker was really not worth mentioning. Don't say that. Even 100 hero-ranked swordsmen can't make a piece of delicious bread. From this point, you are more useful than 100 hero-ranked swordsmen. Hua Hua said with great certainty. Even in all the White Lotus sword domain, there was probably only one hero-ranked baker, Yun Shi. Only large gods domains with a large number of people and a highly developed civilization could there be such hero-ranked careers which were unrelated to battles. Their value was far beyond common hero-ranked battle careers. The hero rank had exceeded the limit of flesh and blood. The medicine that could cure mortals could be of no use to hero-ranked beings. Only hero-ranked divine spells and magic could cure a hero-ranked being's body, but these spells and magic were very rare and hard to learn. In this way, the hero-ranked golden bread made by Unwilling was very valuable. It was easy to carry and could cure almost all the ranked beings of all races. At the critical moment, it could be a trump card to save the owner's life. Why don't you come and eat it too? After eating half of the golden bread, Hua blushed. Yunxi's golden bread had become more and more delicious recently. She almost couldn't control her appetite. No, a lady shouldn't eat so much. Well, looking at the white butter left on the corners of Hua's mouth, his face warmed up slightly. He unconsciously picked up the bread and bit it lightly. Suddenly, both of them were stunned and blushed involuntarily. It's like indirect kissing? Was Hua being intentional? When they were still kids, they often shared delicious bread in this way. Because of this, they didn't immediately realize that it had already become a little strange after they grew up. Until now, Hua unconsciously put the bread she had eaten on Yunxi's mouth again, and both of them had white marks of white butter on their lips. The accelerated heartbeat told the couple that something was different from the past, which proved that they had grown up. A week after returning from Hydra's world, behind Yunxi, there were 3 puppies following him in a line. This had become a unique scene in the girls' dorm of the Starwing Knights. Good morning, May. Good morning, Star Thunder, Starfire, Star Snow. The girls who met them would laugh and greet Yunxi, as well as the 3 puppies. However, unlike when they first arrived at the Sword Palace, there was something more in the eyes of all the girls. It's better to call it enthusiasm or desire. In this maiden garden, Yunxi felt that he was like a gray wolf lurking in a flock of sheep or a fox hid in a herd of rabbits. These sheep and rabbits weren't wary of him and even wanted to approach him. No, young girls should be more careful. Don't be so defenseless. Breakfast. Ling, I'm telling you. Why do you rush to the table still wearing your night clothes? Don't behave as if you have been starved for 300 years. Didn't you notice that everyone's eyes changed when they looked at you? The dignity of the Starwing Knights was all gone. Ling, etiquette. Have you forgotten everything I taught you? Fortunately, the mind of the secretary of the Starwing Knights was still normal. Mei Lan scolded Ling with a serious look. I'm hungry. Shaking her big boobs, Ling ran to Yunxi with a look of, food is the most important thing. Bread. I need bread. Hey, I'm here. Yunxi showed a helpless look and took out a loaf of bread. Mei, you can't spoil Ling. Watching Yunxi take out the fragrant bread, Mei Lan was desperate. Why can Ling, that useless person, always get Mei's bread so easily? Ahoo! Ling picked Yunxi's bread like a puppy, sat back in her seat, and swallowed the bread quickly. Without Mei's bread, a new day will not begin. Anyway, I can't get married after sleeping with Mei, so I don't mind being fed by Mei. This was Ling's simple philosophy. As for the affairs of the Starwing Knights, just let Mei Lan do them. I only need to enjoy my life. Mei Lan, I'll give you one too. Looking at Mei Lan's hurt expression, Yunxi had to take out another loaf of bread and handed it over to Mei Lan. Sigh. When had his relationship with them become so strange? Thank you. Compared with Ling, Mei Lan still had common sense and etiquette. She would absolutely not eat other people's food and regard it as a matter of course. Unless it was between husband and wife, even the best of friends shouldn't be so intimate. How shameless, Ling. You are a lady of a great noble family. Have you forgotten the etiquette of the upper class? Just as Mei Lan stared at Ling and held her bread tightly, in case that Ling snatched at her bread, they heard a lazy voice. Before Mei Lan realized it, 1/3 of her bread had strangely disappeared. Woo! Like a hamster whose cheeks were stuffed with food. Chow. The deputy leader of the Starwing Knights were leaning on Mei Lan's shoulder and chewed the bread in her mouth. Deputy leader. Mei Lan looked at the remaining bread in her hand with tears in her eyes. She was ready to enjoy the bread slowly with black tea. How could she eat the bread now? Yummy. Xiao Chao patted Mei Lan on the shoulder with an innocent look. Other members of the Starwing Knights watched them with a look of envy. I want to eat Mei's bread, too. I've tasted it once. It's so delicious. Mei Lan is really a good person. Unfortunately, Mei can only make several loaves of bread per day. What a pity. I really envy Ling Ling. I also want to eat Mei's bread every day. Well, that's it. Now in the Starwing Knights, the ownership of Mei's bread had become a symbol of identity, and even a series of hidden rules had emerged. Only the top 10 members of the Starwing Knights could enjoy Yuan Shi's special butter bread, while the rest could only eat Yuan Shi's mass-produced white bread. Lu was an exception. Although she wasn't one of the top 10 members, because she was the only hero-ranked pharmacist and because of a very special reason, she could also eat Mei's special butter bread every day. In order to eat Mei's butter bread, the girls of the Starwing Knights were practicing themselves hard every day, trying their best to get into the top 10 list. Well, it could be regarded as a unique view of the Starwing Knights. Mei, don't you continue practicing your closed mouth Zen? After enjoying the morning feeding time, Ling Ling looked at Yuan Shi curiously and asked that damn question again. No, stop asking. Even after a week, Yuan Shi still felt a headache once he remembered what his body did when he was practicing so-called closed-mouth Zen. Ling Ling and Mei Lan in front of him were all victims of the closed-mouth Zen period. On the list of victims, there were also Huayu, Lu, White Lotus, and Red Lotus. The sequelae had not disappeared yet. Ling Ling's expression when she looked at him was the best proof, which always reminded Yuan Shi of what he had done to her and what mistakes he had made. Hoo, I really didn't mean to do that. Give me a break. Ling Ling, don't make a fool of yourself. Mei Lan stood up and secretly took a glance at Yuan Shi. There was also a trace of confusion in her eyes. Don't you need to sleep with me now, Mei? Being stared at by Ling Ling and Mei Lan, Yuan Shi really wanted to find a hole to hide in to avoid embarrassment. Damn it, that's not what he did. Why are bad rumors about him spreading amongst the girls of the Starwing Knights? The rumors said that he would force the girls he liked to sleep with him and use butter bread as hush money. He was just practicing his skill of making bread recently, because he didn't want to waste food. So he gave Ling Ling, Mei Lan, and Xiao Chao the bread he made. Isn't it natural for a baker to practice his skill of making bread? He also wanted to make sufficient golden butter bread to satisfy all girls of the Starwing Knights, but he couldn't do that at all. Making bread from the void was actually consuming his vitality. In the water god's world, his limit was to make 100 loaves of bread per day, but that would overdraft his physical strength. It wasn't a normal state. After coming to the Sword Palace, he only made a dozen golden butter bread per day. If he made more, his mental strength would be affected. If he puts on the White Emperor's mask, he could also make 100 loaves of butter bread per day, but after doing this, he wouldn't have any strength to move even a finger. Alas, looking at the silent Yuan Shi, Mei Lan's eyes were somewhat melancholy. With a cup of black tea, she nibbled her bread bit by bit. After becoming the secretary of the Starwing Knights, her temperament had been distinctly sublimated. Now, no one could see from her appearance that she was just an ordinary girl from a common family. As the representative of the civilian girls of the Starwing Knights, her temperament was more and more like a girl of the nobility. Mei's handmade bread is incredible magic. There's a big secret in Mei's skirt. As long as you get Mei's favor, you will find a different world. Rumors like these had spread in the girls' dorm over and over again. After lies had been repeated 1,000 times, even the liars would think that they were the truth, let alone that these rumors were mixed with parts of the truth. Yuan Shi's bread was indeed not a common bread. They were hero-ranked golden butter bread, which could whiten and nourish the eater's skin, increasing their charm. With such immediate results, it was natural that there were so many strange rumors. Probably only Yuan Shi himself hadn't noticed that the lucky black hair had become a tale of the White Lotus Sword Palace. The application of joining the Starwing Knights had swamped Mei Lan's desk, and the number is still increasing. It's time to go to the classroom. Noticing that more and more eyes were staring at him with a burning desire, Yuan Shi ran away in confusion. Hua, it's all your fault. Passing through the room of the leader of the Starwing Knights, Yuan-shi tacitly threw a loaf of bread into the window which was specially opened for him. A holy beetle flew by, held the golden butter bread, and flew to its master. "Oh, it's today's bread." Huayu, who had just woken up from a sweet dream, looked at the black-haired maid running past the window with a smile. Yuan-shi ran quickly through the woods and past Lulu's medicinal garden. He skillfully took out a loaf of bread, threw it into the air with a perfect arc. The lovely little rabbit jumped into the air and grabbed Yuan-shi's bread happily with the cradle in her hand, then fell to the ground with her cute rabbit ears shivered in the air. "Lulu, come to class quickly. The tutor said you missed too many classes." Yuan-shi trotted all the way through Lulu's medicinal garden. "Well, I'll be right here." Despite that, Yuan-shi knew that she probably wouldn't come out of the medicinal garden today. It seemed that the herbs she cultivated had reached an important stage recently. She spent almost all day in this small medicinal garden. As for the course of the Sword Palace, even Lulu's tutor wasn't a hero-ranked pharmacist. Even if she went to the class, the tutor wasn't qualified to teach her. Running through the medicinal garden where Lulu was, Yuan-shi hesitated for a moment, looking at the ancient palace in front of him. He took out 2 loaves of golden butter bread and threw them to the palace. A white light flashed and the 2 loaves of bread disappeared in the air. As for who took the bread away, that was Yuan-shi's secret with someone. "Well, the food has been good lately." Red Lotus was satisfied with the taste of the bread. "Yes, it's not bad to have a maid." White Lotus smiled and enjoyed the breakfast time with her sister. She did not mention that name tacitly. The Starwing Knights. It's really a good organization. After eliminating the prejudice against someone, Red Lotus actually appreciated the Starwing Knights. First of all, its greatest advantage was that its members were all females. Moreover, its leader and deputy leader were geniuses. They could certainly enter the hero rank as long as they wanted to. As one of the true masters of the White Lotus sword domain, Red Lotus didn't mind having as many female knights as possible. Finally, it's Hua. After delivering the bread all the way, Yuan-shi let out a sigh of relief. Since when did he start to deliver his bread directly? 1, 2, 3. After counting his stock, Yuan-shi took out 3 of the best golden butter bread. This was a morning gift for his childhood sweetheart, a habit formed not long ago after they came back from the water god's world. Well, it's done. After sending out all the bread, Yuan-shi let out a sigh of relief and began to look forward to today's course after eating a loaf of bread. The history of sky swords was a course that Yuan-shi had been waiting for, because today's course was going to introduce his teacher, Cassina, to the students. As Cassina's disciple, it was absolutely necessary to choose this course. Yuan-shi would like to know what great achievements his teacher had made in the Sky Sword God's domain and how famous her title, the Battle God, was. In the mortal world, it was hard to know this kind of knowledge. Sky swords normally only appeared in fairy tale stories. For mortals, the legend rank was such a remote existence. Only in places like the White Lotus Sword Palace could there be correct knowledge about the legend ranks for people to learn. Just like Yuan-shi, there were many members of the Starwing Knights who were interested in Cassina the Battle God. At a glance, almost half of the members of the Starwing Knights had arrived at the class. Ling, Meilon, Xiao, apart from Huayu and Lulu. Almost all of the top 10 of the Starwing Knights were in the classroom. However, to Yuan-shi's surprise, they seemed to be in a strange state of excitement. These girls formed a circle, looked at something, and exclaimed, "This is amazing. I never expected. There's something like that. Hey, let me see it again. Is there anything over there?" Yuan-shi looked at the girls and wondered what attracted so much attention. "Don't you know what happened, Mei?" Suddenly, he heard Huayu's voice. "Huayu, has anything happened recently?" Yuan-shi really knew nothing about the things among these girls. This is not a major event in our Sword Palace, but a major event that shocked the endless gods' domains. Huayu patted Yuan-shi on the shoulder, then sat skillfully beside him and took out a crystal ball shrouded in mist from her arms. Leader Huayu has also ordered the goods. Oh, this one looks more advanced than the one over there. Really, this is a limited edition crystal ball. Not only pictures, but it can also save sound into it. It must be made by a famous alchemist. When Huayu took out the crystal ball, all the members of the Starwing Knights ran to her and looked longingly at their leader. Why? Is this crystal ball such a precious work of art? Even so, isn't their reaction a little too exaggerated? Looking at them, Yunshi expressed his ignorance. Of course, my crystal ball is the best. It was a treasure made by someone on the spot at that time, not a cheap duplicate. Huayu held up the crystal ball in her hand with restraint and pride. This is an authentic, unique recording crystal ball. Yeah, I love you, leader. We can finally hear the real original version this time. Be quick, be quick. Play it. My heart has begun to beat faster. No matter how many times I listen to it, it can always touch my heart. Almost all the people in the classroom started to gather around Huayu and look at the crystal ball in her palm with expectations. Why do I have such a bad feeling? Yunshi looked at the crystal ball, and soon his ominous presentiment came true. Well, let's get started. Huayu's fingertip touched the center of the crystal ball and toggled a switch. Inside the crystal ball, it suddenly became dark. Start. Start. Wow. Wow. The texture of the darkness is different. It's coming soon. The girls stared at the center of the crystal ball, while Yunshi was stunned. This is. After the darkness, it was light and the girl who appeared on the stage. The girl wore a pure white dress and a pair of fantastic crystal shoes, smiling at the world. That smile and that pure and flawless temperament captured the hearts of all the girls around. Why does this appear in the White Lotus Sword domain? Yunshi was stupefied by the scene in the crystal ball. Can you feel it? How beautiful and ugly the world is. It's there, so beautiful, so broad, as if it can breathe. I'll reach out my hands and try to catch it, but I can't touch it. I came to this world, observed it, understood it, and loved it. Like the people in the Mechanist God's domain, the girls of the White Lotus Sword Palace could also feel the power contained in the song. The girls singing transcended the limits of time and space, echoing in one god's domain after another through devices like the crystal ball in Huayu's palms. The name Qian instantly spread throughout the endless gods' domains, and even many gods praised the singing of the girl. Punishment? This must be punishment. Why? Why? The White Lotus Sword domain was 10,000s of light years away from the Mechanist God's domain. Why do the people here also know about it? No matter how many times I listen to the song, the voice is beautiful. This singer really saved the world. My heart is melting. The crystal ball made by the alchemist on the spot is indeed the closest to the original version. I really want to know how the people who heard the song in the Mechanist God's domain felt. Oh, if Qin stages a concert again, I will go there at all costs. Sorry. I'm sorry. There won't be another concert anymore. Looking at the figure in the crystal ball, Yunshi was so embarrassed that he only hoped to return to the past and erase this damn scene completely. Who was the alchemist? Who is this genius that recorded the concert and sold it all over the endless gods' domains, even including the White Lotus Sword domain? I have died in the past. Who will know my name and life story? I was lost in the unknown. Who will know my place? My heart has gone to nirvana. Who can seek for its trace? My disappearance is already doomed, but I shall never stop. The disaster hasn't been ended, and will last forever in eternity. My fear, my tears, and my heart is empty. I am nothing, I am void. I am ash, I am desolation. The gods have died, the twilight is coming. As the light is still shining on the ground, I return from eternity. Codename, Alpha, the supreme god of the Mechanist God's domain. When Alpha appeared, the girls around Huayu were all shocked. They watched the silver-haired god's appearance and listened to her affecting song, but couldn't find any appropriate words to describe their feelings. The alchemist's crystal ball perfectly sealed the god's voice inside it, and anyone who heard the song could feel the charm it contained. This crystal ball is so perfect. The song sealed in other duplicates is also good, but they can't be compared with the original version. No matter how many times I listened to it, I couldn't feel bored. It's amazing. That god named Alpha is also very powerful. Most devices of the Mechanist god's domain will lose efficacy after being taken into other gods' domains. But she created this crystal ball by combining the power of magic and science to spread Qian's singing. I never expected that someone could sing such a miraculous song. When I first heard it, my whole body couldn't stop trembling. I'm sorry, it was used to save the world, so it's really not a normal song. She helplessly looked at the girls who were still intoxicated from the song. When he stepped onto the stage, he never expected that this scene would be recorded and spread all over the endless god's domains. But it wasn't his fault. He just accidentally entered the Mechanist god's domain. He was a quantum ghost. After singing the song, Alpha's figure appeared again. Her eyes seemed to cross the endless stars, staring at the faraway void. "I'll find you, wherever you are." The two short sentences represented the determination of a supreme god. The creations of the Mechanist god's domain can't work outside the Mechanist god's domain was originally an iron law of that domain. But now, Alpha's god power had changed it. The mass-produced crystal balls were made by Alpha. They were the crystallization of wisdom, science, and mystery. Alpha manufactured thousands of crystal balls and used her god power to seal Qian's singing into them. After that, she also made millions of duplicates by inputting the song into cheaper crystal balls. Of course, the quality of the sound would slightly reduce in these cheaper crystal balls, and sold them to the endless gods' domains. Anyone who heard the song would be attracted and buy one. As a result, the Mechanist god's domain had received innumerable additional orders. Even with all the alchemists in that domain starting to make crystal balls from dawn to dusk, they would need 3 years to complete all the additional orders. The crystal balls that held the recorded song of Qian's had become the largest foreign trade order of the entire Mechanist god's domain. It also made more people know Alpha's name, not limited only to the people who paid attention to Stargo. The Mechanist god's domain always maintained a semi-closed state in the past. Now, because the birth of their supreme god, Cyber Elf Alpha, the entire god's domain began to enter a new era. These crystal balls spread from the Mechanist god's domain were the opportunities for change brought by Alpha. Of course, she didn't care at all about it. She made these crystal balls just for a simple reason. She wanted to find Qian, in other words, the master of Stargo. As for why the crystal balls used to find Qian eventually became the most popular products in the endless gods' domains, it was just an accident that even Alpha herself didn't expect. At first, she sent out the crystal balls for free, but soon, the Mechanist god's domain received a bunch of invitations from other gods, all of which were about the trade requirements of these crystal balls that recorded the singing of Qian. In this way, the crystal balls became a kind of super hot product. The scene happened in this classroom had appeared everywhere in the endless gods' domains countless times. No, I'm done. After discovering the origin and development of these crystal balls, she could only sigh with regret. Even in this remote White Lotus Sword domain, people could buy the crystal balls that recorded Qian's singing. It was too shameful. When he imagined how many people had bought and watched the crystal balls, she only wanted to cry. "Alpha, you're going to make me die." "Who? May, don't you think this girl named Qian is somewhat similar to you?" Hua Yu said and looked at the figure in the crystal ball with a smile on her lips. If it wasn't for this reason, she would not have bought this limited edition crystal ball. 2012 was the serial number for this crystal ball, representing that it was the 2012th limited edition made by alchemists. Now collecting these numbered crystal balls had become a fashion in the endless gods' domains. It was said that even some gods were looking for them. This was the charm of Qian and the miracle created by the 3 water gods' priestesses. No, not at all. Yunxi resolutely denied Hua Yu's question. The girl in the crystal ball has nothing to do with me. Let this black history forever be a black history. The truth should be buried in history forever. Sometimes, the more resolutely you deny a thing, the easier the thing would be noticed. After Hua Yu said it, the girls around her also found out about this. Really? Mei looks like Qian. They look like sisters. Mei is the older sister and Qian is the young sister. One is a singer in the Mechanist god's domain, and the other is a disciple of the Sword Palace, What an incredible coincidence. I've heard that there will always be 10 people who look like you in the world. That's true. The girls chattered around Yunshi excitedly. I can't sing that kind of song. Yunshi shook his head and presented the best evidence for himself. It's not a lie. This Qian is not him, but a quantum ghost in a dream. In the real world, he didn't have that voice. Oh, it's true. That kind of singing is amazing. I really want to know how Qian has such a wonderful voice. May, do you want to be a singer, too? The girls of the Starwing Knights looked with interest at Yunshi. No. Yunshi firmly refused this proposal. Are you kidding me? What kind of punishment is this? I don't want to experience this anymore. It's a pity. I think May could be a singer too. Well, I think so too. May, you must look beautiful in a white dress. The girls laughed and joked with Yunshi, which made Yunshi have an inexplicable sense of sadness. Before I practiced the closed mouths in, before the days I went to the Starry Sky chessboard, they didn't behave like this. After returning from the Starry Sky chessboard, everyone's attitude towards him changed, as if they suddenly became more intimate. Now, they all took the initiative to get close to him, pulling his hand and leaning their bodies over him. As for the invitation to take a bath together, Yunshi had refused them hundreds of times. And why do girls like to go to the toilet collectively? Why can girls stay in it for 15 minutes? What's more, why do you dress so exposed and casual in the girls' dorm? Shouldn't girls be more reserved? Why can I always pick up unknown panties near the door of my room? Why can girls hold each other's hands and nestle close to each other so easily? Do you know how hard I have to restrain my desire? If May doesn't like it, we shouldn't force her. Eventually, Hua Yu came out and rescued Yunshi. As the head of the Starwing Knights, Hua Yu is much more dignified than Yunshi. I want to drop out of the Sword Palace. Yunshi's eyes became dull and listless. Hua, it's all your fault. In this way, sooner or later, I will be unable to restrain my desire. Like a big gray wolf in a flock of sheep, he doubted how long he could keep pretending. Especially after accepting Teacher Kasina's Seed of the Battle God, his vitality was increasing day by day, which was like adding fuel to the fire in this situation. Cough. As Yunshi was desperately thinking about how to suppress his own impulse, the history teacher finally walked into the classroom. Today, I will talk about the history of Kasina, the battle god, the sixth sky sword. But before that, I will introduce a transfer student to you. Transfer student? At this time? Yunshi looked at the pale-haired history teacher with some surprise. The transfer student is from the Heavens Road Palace. She is one of the best students in the Heavens Road Palace. The history teacher said proudly. The Heavens Road Palace and the Sword Palace were equally famous in the Eastern God's domain. The creed of the Heavens Road Palace was unification of all rules. The history of the Heavens Road Palace was even longer than the Sword Palace. The Sky Sword God's domain was a god's domain with sword as its veneration. Even so, the influence of the Heavens Road Palace wasn't inferior to the Sword Palace in the Sky Sword God's domain. From the scope of the entire Eastern God's domain, the influence of the Heavens Road Palace was even higher than the Sword Palace. The disciples of the Heavens Road Palace were hundreds of times more than the disciples of the Sword Palace. As one of the best disciples of the Heavens Road Palace, no matter who the transfer student is, she is indeed qualified to be a transfer student of the Sword Palace. Come on, Robin. The history teacher looked outside the door. He didn't know why this genius of the Heavens Road Palace suddenly visited the White Lotus Sword Palace and wanted to be a transfer student, but from the attitude of the twin witches towards her, she must be an extraordinary genius. Oh, probably she came for the White Lotus secret treasure, he thought. Dressed in a bright red cloak, a girl she felt very familiar with walked up to the podium and then stared at She and the girls of the Starwing Knights. Hua Yu, the leader of the Starwing Knights. Xiao Qiao, the deputy leader of the Starwing Knights. Except for the little rabbit, the people who appeared in her prophecy were all here. Oh, let me see if the future I choose can come true. My name is Robin, a transfer student from the Heavens Road Palace. I'm good at divination. No matter what you want to divine, I can divine for you. I came here because I saw the future. Oh, it's her. She soon recalled who she was. She was the first augur he met, and her divination was very accurate. So, she was a disciple of the Heaven's Road Palace. Average height, average shoulder width, average chest, average cheek. If she hadn't been introduced to them by the teacher, no one would have found that such a person was standing at the door. It would have been like the world had forgotten her. All parts were plain, except for her eyes, which were gazing into Yuan-Shi's eyes at the moment. It was a pair of deep, bottomless eyes, as if she had seen through everything. My future is right in front of me. With great courage, Robin finally appeared in front of the future she chose. Despite this, the choice seemed so incredible and disorganized, like a butterfly flying in a summer storm. However, she was still willing to believe that even with such a tragic person as herself, she still had the chance to seize her only chance for happiness. At this moment, she reached out to her future, bowed her head and prayed. "Are you willing to be my lost future?" She stared blankly at Robin, who was half kneeling in front of him. "What's wrong with this?" "Yeah. Is this a proposal?" "No, it's a confession." "Are you willing to be my lost future?" "Oh, what a romantic confession." The moment Robin spoke her wish, the girls in the whole classroom set off an explosion of exclamation. Hua Yu looked with pity at Robin. Xiao Chao moved her hands and feet and had a feeling of eagerness to try. "No, no, no. You can't jump the gun." Ling Ling stood up and put her hands on her waist. Even though she didn't say such shameful words to Mei, how could a new member be so arrogant? "Ling Ling, come on." Only at this time, Mei Lan was supportive of Ling Ling. "Can you feel me?" Robin was about to cry. After being cursed by the bloody robins, her existence had been largely stripped from the world. Envy, concern, sympathy, and even hostility. Even feeling these negative affectivities had long become a luxury to her. Her existence was so weak that sometimes, even her teacher at the Heaven's Road Palace forgot that he had such a disciple. "Ah, that's great. Sure enough, I was right to come here. The future is here. Humph, I will never let you have Mei." Ling Ling stood up, held Yuan-Shi's right hand, and pressed his arm with her big breasts, declaring war on Robin on her own initiative. The future is the interweaving of different destiny trajectories. The future is a collection of time fragments. I want to find this future. Robin stood up and stared at Ling Ling without hesitation. Her eyes were sincere and calm, and a flame called hope burned deep in her pupils. The victim who falls into an endless abyss will try to grasp and hold on to any hope tightly. Robin was the victim, longing for even a ray of hope. "Hey, what are you looking at?" Ling Ling threw out her chest again, which made Robin have an indescribable sense of failure. The gap seems a little big. Robin looked at the girls of the Starwing Knights. Unexpectedly, she saw the same emotion in their eyes. Sometimes, the friendship between girls was so wonderful. They could become good friends just for a trivial reason. Now, Robin realized this. And because they had the same despair when facing this enemy, the flat-chested members of the Starwing Knights decided to accept Robin as one of them. "We must find the demon dragon. We must find the demon dragon. We must find the demon dragon." The Dragon Blood Alliance of the Starwing Knights had a new member today. She was being noticed and watched. Even just realizing such a trivial thing had made Robin feel compulsive happiness. It made her feel like she had traveled back to the mortal world, not a ghost floating around in an isolated corner of the world. "Thank you, Mei. Thank you for giving me your blessing," Robin said and stretched out her hand, holding Yuan-Shi's hand. Well, Robin seemed to have forgotten something important at that time. Yuan-Shi looked at the girl with a guilty face. When did she find it? When he planted the seed in her body, his move should have been very stealthy. Why did she seem to know everything? Hua Yu looked at them and sighed. Mei, do you know what your blessing stands for? This is a key that can let any person enter the hero rank and even the higher ranks. If people knew that you have such a magical power, all the forces of the endless God's domain would come and contend for you at all costs. Do you really know what it means to give this blessing to us? Nobody can ever leave Mei now. This is probably the sweetest curse in the world for the girls of the Starwing Knights. If you want to pursue Mei, You must beat me down first. Ling Ling glared at Robin. A fool wouldn't mind who her enemy is. Well, what a powerful enemy. Robin carefully calculated the difference between her and Ling Ling and came to a rather sad conclusion. In terms of femininity, there was a big gap between her and Ling Ling. However, I still have chances. After all, I have a special weapon. Ah, why did I have such a strange idea? Robin's face slightly turned red. After returning from the endless nightmares, her life was like being covered by a layer of gray mist. In only a few moments would her life be stained with the color of blood. Now, she was literally confronting a girl of her age. Just for a few moments, she had experienced different scenarios one after another, which were what she absolutely couldn't touch in the gray mist world. Hey, my victory! Even though she was a fool, Ling Ling knew that she had won this turn. Damn, Ling Ling is still so arrogant. Why is this fool so lucky? Everything is done by Mei Lan. Is she also a secretary of the Starwing Knights? Ling Ling is our secretary, but what on earth has she done for us? The civilian, flat-chested, girls of the Starwing Knights glared at Ling Ling and felt the same frustration Robin was feeling. That sense of frustration was one of the reasons the civilian, flat-chested, girls formed an alliance. In order to narrow the gap, they had written countless plans to catch that damn demon dragon, and the key was the dragon plant Lulu was cultivating. Don't be too arrogant. We can also continue to grow up. We will hunt the demon dragon. This was the wings of all the civilian, flat-chested girls. Well, it sounded like the barking of underdogs. In this Battle Gods Championship contest, Cassina defeated one of her strongest enemies, the Ruby Dragon, who was also her best friend. The history teacher said with excitement. The legend of the battle god finally reached its peak. Oh, so, although teacher Cassina always behaved casual and unreliable, she is really a super strong fighter at the top of the endless gods' domains. She had defeated many gods so far. After listening to this lesson, Yunshi's heart was filled with all sorts of feelings. The gray-haired history teacher grew up listening to the legends of Cassina. The battle god was born in an ancient desert tribe and was recognized by the sands of time when she was still at the hero rank. However, she never used the sword in her life. With the strength of her own body, she defeated countless extraordinary races and stood on the top of the Battle Gods Championship contest and never lost. Many people think that Cassina is probably the strongest one among all the Sky Swords who still appeared in front of the public. The name of the six-sword sword is well known in the Endless Gods domains. For the people in the Sky Sword Gods domain, she is a living myth, known as the most likely one to become the fourth deicide Sky Sword. After this history lesson, Yunshi fled from the burning eyes of the girls and crept into the depths of the Sword Palace. With Cassina's token, he could go anywhere in the White Lotus Sword Palace, which was probably the greatest convenience of being Cassina's disciple. As for his destination, it was the place where the legendary White Lotus secret treasure was located. Accurately speaking, it wasn't the true White Lotus secret treasure, but was just a projection of the White Lotus secret treasure. Even so, it was still the most precious treasure in the entire White Lotus Sword Palace. Every year, only the top 10 disciples of the White Lotus Sword Palace were allowed to enter this holy land. Of course, Yunshi didn't have that common sense. He just wandered around the witch's palace and felt something unusual. Finally, he found the room where the White Lotus secret treasure was projected. This place was the biggest secret of the White Lotus Sword Palace. Only the master of the White Lotus Sword domain and the twin witches knew its position. Yunshi found it here by accident. He didn't even know what he found. Look at the steps to enter here. The first step, jump into the waterfall and find the cave hidden in the waterfall. When the twin witches held the sacrificial ceremony, they had brought him here once. The second step, choose the only right path to the underground staircase from the 13 paths. If you chose the wrong one, you would trigger the fatal traps. The third step, after choosing the right path, you must walk in the path following the right rhythm of footsteps. Otherwise, the traps would also be activated. The fourth step, after entering the underground palace smoothly, you must find the only hidden cabin in dozens of palaces. Who would have thought that those precious palaces are all camouflage, and the cabin built in the corner of the garden is the only correct answer? The fifth step. Find the mirror in the cabin, then input the correct password and gesture to enter the secret chamber in the mirror. If you said any wrong words, you would never have the chance to retry. The sixth step. You can finally see the door of the secret chamber, but there is no hint about the way to open the door. The seventh step. You can finally touch the projection of the real White Lotus secret treasure, which is also a trap. Because as long as the contact method is incorrect, it would trigger the counterattack of the White Lotus secret treasure. Well, Yunshi didn't know anything. He doesn't walk in the path following the correct rhythm of footsteps, nor did he open the mirror using the right keyword, let alone know the way to open the door. But he had Casina's token. Therefore, none of the traps were activated, because none of the sword palaces in the Sky Sword God's domain would dare regard a Sky Sword as their enemy. In theory, the entire Sky Sword God's domain belonged to Sky Swords. With Casina's token, Yunshi easily found the biggest secret of the White Lotus sword domain. Why he would run straight to this place after class? Because the girls of the Starwing Knights were becoming more and more strange. After Ling Ling did that thing and tasted the sweetness, other girls also started to imitate her. When he gets up in the morning and opened the window, he saw blue and white panties hanging on the branches outside of the window. When he walked out of the room and raised his head, he saw pink panties hanging in the corridor. Even on the way to walk, he often found black lace panties on the road. In the worst case, Yunshi even found white panties in his lunchbox, which were still warm. Sooner or later, he would be unable to control himself. Now, only while being here, could make him feel at ease. Although he didn't know what the big light ball was in this room, after finding this secret room, Yunshi finally had his own private space. At least, there wouldn't be panties of all colors and unnamed letters which invited him to various secret dating places, ranging from the woods to rivers. If I go, I will no longer be able to be a gentleman. Thinking of this, Yunshi felt that he could still try to struggle. The milky white light ball floated lightly in front of Yunshi, which was the biggest secret of the entire White Lotus Sword Palace, the projection of the real White Lotus secret treasure. However, in Yunshi's eyes, it was just a very distinctive decoration in this secret room. As always, he proficiently reached out his hand, pinched and kneaded the soft, warm light ball, and then saw countless and incredible scenery emerge from the surface of the light ball. It was an old city, bathed in the cold moonlight. Compared with what Yunshi saw last time, the dead city was more bleak and desolate. The snow and ice scattered in the city could be seen everywhere as if time here had been frozen. The cold had gone deep into the ground, making the walls, grass, leaves, and vines all covered with a thick layer of frost. When the cold wind blew, it would always roll up countless silver-white particles. A hunter in black sat in the center of the deserted city, and the magic sword inverted beside him still retained traces of blood. His old face looked at the boundless clear sky, looking at the distant blue horizon and cold moon. Quietly, it seemed that he was the only one left in the world. The sadness, joy, and warmth in his life had all disappeared, leaving countless ghosts around him like nightmares. It was the highest inheritance of the ghost sword domain. Forbidden siren sword. Boiling volcanoes. Endless volcanic eruptions. As if doomsday had come, the ocean of lava had devoured the earth, mountains, forests, and everything else in the world. Above the lava ocean were dark golden clouds that were constantly churning and dropping fiery red bubbles of lava. Like the real ocean, the lava ocean was also vast and boundless. At the end of sight, white, dazzling lava waves heaved wave peaks of hundreds of feet tall, rolling up one wave of lava after another and hit the red, sulfurized coast of rock. From time to time, there were lava pillars rising to the sky and bombarding the dark golden clouds in the sky, triggering earth-shaking explosions. It was the inheritance of a sky sword, the nuclear sword. In the distance, the sky hid in endless darkness, indicating that a storm was coming. The wind was driving fast-moving clouds, rapidly devouring the twinkling stars. Beneath the storm was an endless, dark, and terrible sea. The storm was galloping with thunder and red fire serpent-like lightning flashed across the dark sky one after another, illuminating the waves roiling in the chaotic and turbulent tide. In the storm, the sky and the earth were as dark as hell. The only light was the thunder and lightning rolling in the clouds. In the storm, there were spirits flying, which was the natural phenomenon that represented disaster and death. Numerous runes loomed in the storm, which was the source of the storm, and the evil words of the spirits. It was the inheritance of another sky sword, Storm Sword. Not this one. Oh, neither this one. Yuanshi pinched the light ball 1, 2, 3 times, but still didn't find his favorite scenario. What he wanted was a scenario that could let him calm down. None of the Dead City, Lava Sea, or Storm met his requirements. They all were too fierce. Being pinched and kneaded by Yuanshi, the light ball reluctantly changed the scenario inside it again, and finally showed him the scenario he liked. Well, that's it. Yuanshi let go of the light ball contentedly, put his hands behind his head, and looked comfortably at his favorite scene. It was a pair of Bodhi trees, the only scenario in the light ball that could let him feel relaxed. Looking at the scenario, Yuanshi's mind seemed to have integrated into it. Under the old Bodhi twin trees, it was cool and quiet. Even when bees and butterflies flew under the shade, their movements would become gentle. Even the chirps of cicadas became very gentle. The lovely green grass under the Bodhi twin trees was not mixed with a bit of yellow color, and the slender stems stood upright without any shake. As if the Bodhi twin trees were having a sweet dream, there were innumerable bundles of yellow flowers hanging on the branches of the Bodhi twin trees, and the fragrance would percolate into his lungs every time he breathed. Not far away, there was a clear, bottomless river over there. Translucent fish swam in the river happily and sometimes jumped out of the water, leaving a beautiful spray in the air. Looking at this wonderful scene of nature, Yuanshi sat quietly in the shade of the tree and naturally felt that his body and mind were relaxed. This scenario was Yuanshi's favorite among all the scenarios in the light ball. As long as he looked at it, his heart would naturally calm down and forget all his troubles. Sitting under the Bodhi twin trees, Yuanshi felt that everything in the world was far away from him, and his mind was naturally immersed into nature as if he had become a grass, a shrub, and a dust particle in the world. There was no need to think about anything deliberately. Just looking at this quiet and harmonious world, Yuanshi felt his heart get healed. At this moment, he felt that he could ignore all the troubles such as the threats from his ex-girlfriends, the difficulties he had faced and was facing, and all kinds of temptations from the girls of the Starwing Nights. Ding! 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 From nowhere, Yuanshi heard the sound of a bell echoed beside his ears. The sound of the bell wasn't from any instrument, but from the depth of his soul. It was the resonance between his soul and the world. It was the bell that knocked on the door of infinite wisdom, the key to a mysterious field. Every time the bell rang, it represented that Yuanshi's soul had been washed by an unknown power once. It was the highest blessing recorded inside of the White Lotus secret treasure, unlimited wisdom resonance. In the history of Buddhism, all the people whose minds had been washed by this sound had eventually become eminent monks and stamped their names on the pages of history. Among them, the most eminent monk had only heard the sound 16 times. However, Yuanshi's soul had been washed by this sound hundreds of times, and it seemed that as long as he wanted, he could hear this sound as many times as possible. If the sound had self-consciousness, it would definitely shout, "Young man, you have a great affinity with Buddha. Go to the West and become a Buddhist monk now." But in Yuanshi's heart, he only regarded it as euphonious light music. Oh, the agitation in my heart is cured again today. Burn everything, tear everything, crush everything. Respond to the old contract, Golden Dragon Emperor, come to me. The broken sword in her hands twisted and transformed into a dragon-bone sword. Golden runes appeared on the sword, releasing a unique, overbearing atmosphere. Her strength was expanding and growing. It wasn't a delusion but a reality that was taking place. Wrapped around by golden flames, the roar of dragon became louder. The entire trial area was burning with large flames that burst out in clusters from the depths of the ground, covering the figures of the 32 hero-ranked Black Shadows. They launched their attacks. Raining Heaven, Water Dragon, Eastern Dragon King, Endless Waves. Raining Heaven can summon cloud, and the rainfall can heal all lives within the range. Water Dragon is to use the magic power to form a dragon-shaped battle pet. Eastern Dragon King can borrow the Eastern Dragon King's power to strengthen the performer. Endless Waves can summon endless water to submerge mountains and rivers. Even though the Black Shadows had used these mysteries, they couldn't break through the scorching purgatory that was forming. Hua just stood there and did nothing. The high temperature released from her body had dispelled all the magic spells. In the final analysis, the essence of the two sides was quite different. Naturally, these attacks from the Black Shadows couldn't hurt her. Boom, boom, boom. As if the power around Hua could grow limitlessly, as if this process had awakened an ancient existence, countless materials were being absorbed by this unformed dragon-bone sword, and then compressed, refined, and evolved towards an embryonic form. Yes, this was the process of casting a god weapon. Hua was forging her sword by using the power of her bloodline. If she had this sword when she was facing Ouroboros, no, not enough, not enough. The earth was trembling and the whole space was shaking. With the roar of the dragon, countless lights began to wake up from the collapsing ground and then rose to the sky, flying over to Hua's palm. It was a weapon once lost in history, a fragment of a dragon-bone demon sword. The Dragon Emperor, who was once regarded as an evil lord and slaughtered, responded to Hua's call, reviving in the distant sky sword god's domain. The name of the sword, Dragon Emperor's Sword. It was forged by using the bones of the legendary Dragon Emperor, an ancient strong existence who had a relationship with the sky-flying bloodline. This dragon had golden scales and the most pure blood of the Dragon King, but ultimately fell into darkness and abandoned all glory, wandering in the nightmare world with resentment. Fight for me, Dragon Emperor. This was Hua's order, an amnesty from the purest sky-flying bloodline. Even though he had become a member of the Abyss and wandered in the nightmare world forever, Dragon Emperor still kept the agreement it made in the past and returned to the human world in the form of a god weapon. Dragon Emperor's Sword. 50%, 60%, 87%, 99%. Spanning the distance between time and space, the once lost dragon sword had returned. In the burning golden flames, black gases were constantly released and surrounded the 32 hero-ranked Black Shadows. The reason that the process stopped at 99% was because a crucial ceremony was still unfinished. Numerous golden flames turned into golden powders, flying around Hua's body. Hua slowly but firmly raised the dragon-bone demon sword in her hands. Behind her, in the endless flames, the shadow of the Dragon Emperor was becoming clearer and clearer. Although there was only one head, but the sharp golden teeth, the erect pupils, and the huge scales all exuded a kind of tyranny over everything. Now, all the necessary elements for a new god weapon's birth had been gathered. Legend, mystery, and the power of the source of the world. Hua was forging a weapon that only gods could make in the past. This sword would be her weapon before she reached the legend rank, which had a very strong lethal effect on fantastic creatures. Dragon Emperor's Sword. Wake up! Without any hesitation, Hua raised the sword high in her hand. The ground under her feet began to tremble. One tiny crack after another continued to extend around as if a mountain suddenly pressed down on this land. Instantly, Hua's eyes changed, reflecting the scenery in the golden Dragon Emperor's pupils. Layers of golden light waves rippled from the god weapon in Hua's hands. A powerful force of mana exploded madly around Hua, and countless broken stones were shattered and then turned into ashes. Under this terrifying power, everything was collapsing. Dragon! With the help of Hua's belief and bloodline force, the god weapon was returning from the nightmare world, forged and evolved towards the last step. Behind Hua, the huge golden dragon raised its head and looked at the world, as proud as when it was still alive. Emperor! Huge golden light waves were first compressed to the limit, then released, cut, smashed, and crushed the 32 hero-ranked Black Shadows. The Black Shadows were like a sand castle being trampled by an excited child on the beach, breaking up in an instant. Countless golden waves of light spread wildly. The earth was burning and melting. All things in front of the stacked golden light waves equally turned into powders, and then being blown away. Sword. In the face of the Dragon Emperor's sword, even the stars would be shattered. Hua Hu raised the god weapon in her hands and absorbed the Dragon Emperor's shadow behind her into the sword bit by bit. Dragon Soul casting, this was the last step to give spirituality to the god weapon, but also the most difficult step. 99% the previous process was for paving a way for this last step. The last 1% was the most important thing. An army formed by 64 hero-ranked Black Shadows appeared. The army formed of 64 hero-ranked Black Shadows was defeated. After touching the light waves, the new Black Shadows were crushed like pieces of paper in a storm, leaving no trace. The giant dragon's shadow roared and was satisfied with the girl who summoned it. Unmatched potential and incomparable internal drive for excellence. Her eyes were like storms, like lightning, like lava. She was destined to trample on all the common sense of the world. All hero-ranked beings would pursue the most suitable god weapon for themselves. God weapons would also choose the most suitable master. Dragon Emperor? No, it's Dragon Emperor's sword now. Dragon Emperor's sword had chosen its new master. Go. The last will of the Dragon Emperor left the nightmare world, flying to the sword. The sword was forged. Dragon Emperor's sword. This was a legendary magic weapon made of the bones of the Dragon Emperor. The hilt of the sword was black with golden flames wrapped around it, and the body of the sword was made of huge dragon teeth. The sword doesn't have a blade, because this isn't a weapon that needs to tear the enemy's body with its blade. The power of the sword itself can crush everything. A line of golden patterns stretched from the end of the handle to the tip of the sword, which was about 1.8 meters long and 0.4 meters wide. In general, the sword doesn't look like a weapon for humans at all, but rather like a giant weapon tailored for a 3-meter-tall giant. On the sword body, there was a dragon rune, which represented the real name of this dragon bone magic sword, Dragon Emperor's sword. Once upon a time, the man who forged the sword tried to give it as an inheritance from generation to generation to the successors of his eternal empire. However, this unscrupulous man who murdered the Dragon Emperor didn't satisfy his desires. The kingdom he created was completely destroyed after he died of the curse of the sword, and he didn't have any successors. The curse of the Dragon Emperor not only killed this man, but also killed all the people who participated in the battle against the Dragon Emperor and even affected those people's families and countries. They didn't expect that the Dragon Emperor would fall into the nightmare world and be transformed into one of the strongest monsters of the nightmare world. Because of this, the Dragon Emperor's curse was greatly strengthened and caused their death. In fact, the prototype of this sword had long disappeared into history, leaving only the last fragment in the mortal world. Since the battle against the Dragon Emperor, countless years had passed. The original Dragon Bone sword had been destroyed by the Nightmare Monarch because it thought that the sword didn't deserve to be called Dragon Emperor's sword. Don't get it wrong. The Dragon Emperor was not afraid of death when it was alive. If these people had defeated and killed it using their own power, it wouldn't mind whether or not they would use its body to forge god weapons. If they had defeated it face to face, it wouldn't mind calling this sword forged by using its bones Dragon Emperor's sword. However, the man whose name and kingdom had long been forgotten in the river of history was too sinister. He killed the Dragon Emperor's only descendant by despicable means, and used the Dragon Emperor's descendants' flesh and blood to cast a vicious curse, which corroded the Dragon Emperor's invincible dragon scales. Only then did he gather a group of people to encircle and kill the Dragon Emperor. In this process, they poisoned, cursed, trapped, and slaughtered the Dragon Emperor. They did everything they could, and finally, they gave the Dragon Emperor a fatal blow, which was by using the remains of the Dragon Emperor's only descendant. Therefore, The Dragon Emperor would never admit that such villains are qualified to use its body to forge god weapons. None of them had that qualification. With resentment, the Dragon Emperors activated an ancient contract and reincarnated its dragon soul into the most horrible nightmare world, and instantly became a lord of the nightmare world, becoming a nightmare monarch. In the next decades, it killed all the human beings who had participated in the battle against it and destroyed all the god weapons that were made of its body parts. As time went by, no one still remembered the Dragon Emperor and the people who killed it. Only the sky-flying bloodline still remembered it and summoned it by using the last fragment made of its bones. The Nightmare Monarch had long ceased being the Dragon Emperor. However, it still responded to the girl's call and recognized the girl. The sky-flying bloodline is qualified to be the master of the real Dragon Emperor's sword, and because of this reason, it returned to the mortal world again. Across time and space, across the barriers between the nightmare world and the real world, the Nightmare Monarch floated in the endless darkness, slowly opening its muddy eyes. The last golden glow began to fade away from its pupils. It was its last glorious memory. It was the last unsullied soul of the Dragon Emperor. After its reincarnation in the nightmare world, its body had become thousands of times bigger with countless weird eyes scattered over its new body. With only a stare from any of its eyes, millions of wise creatures would go mad. The last fragment of the dragon bone sword represented the last pride of the Dragon Emperor in the mortal world. Go. The huge black existence gently reached out one of its tentacles and ejected the other fragments of the Dragon Emperor's sword to the girl from the nightmare world. Together with its last unsullied dragon soul, it placed all its trust on the girl who summoned it in accordance with the ancient contract. Oh, the sky-flying bloodline. What an ancient memory. It could barely remember when it was still the Dragon Emperor. It was dumbfounded when it witnessed the true power of the sky-flying bloodline. As time went by, even itself didn't believe that the sky-flying bloodline still remembered its name and summoned it. So, let this be the end of the Dragon Emperor. It would present its last unsullied dragon soul and bones to the noble and sacred supreme blood, the wing beyond all things. You are qualified to use this sword. You are qualified to call it Dragon Emperor's sword. Huh. Finally, Hua was stopped after the sword absorbed the last dragon soul into it. With her location as the center, the entire area was being torn by storms, volcanoes, and lightning at the same time. The ground collapsed and formed a huge whirlpool terrain. The sword is forged. A large number of sweat beads dropped from Hua's forehead, and then were quickly evaporated by the flames on the Dragon Emperor's sword. Being surrounded by scorching flames, the girl's eyes became firmer and more confident. She hadn't reached the hero rank, but could forge her own god weapon. Hua trampled again on the common sense of the entire Sky Sword God's domain, and even the entire Endless God's domains. As long as she wanted to, she could do anything. What she wanted would become unshakable truth. This was the power of the sky-flying bloodline. Ding, ding, ding. In the room of the White Lotus secret treasure, She suddenly had a premonition and woke up from the sound of the bell. It was a kind of premonition you had for no reason. Like an intuition from heaven, he felt as if something bad for him had been born somewhere. It's dangerous, very dangerous. What is it? She racked his brains and could not figure out why he had such an intuition. He had a feeling that the danger was very close. Will there be anything in the White Lotus Sword Palace so dangerous? Not far away from where She was, in the place for trials. Good. Perfect weight, perfect length, perfect width, perfect sword. Hua was testing the sword. The Dragon Emperor's sword was more powerful than Hua had expected. The material of the sword was almost indestructible. Plus the dragon soul lodged in the sword. The power it could release could even destroy a world if necessary. Now, if she faced Ouroboros again, even if she didn't use her sky-flying bloodline, she had the confidence to punch its teeth through the back of its skull. Any females who dare to touch my little she is my enemy, Hua announced while dangerous lights flashed through her eyes. Above her forehead, a strand of hair rotated and warned its master. Wait, More enemies? Hua Hua looked at the dense red dots in her jealousy radar. She always wondered if her jealousy radar had been broken after she came to the White Lotus Sword Palace. Why do the red dots, representing the enemy, increase every day? She almost had an intensive phobia because of this. Ignore all miscellaneous, little fish. With a sweep of her fingertips, Hua Hua wiped out most of the tiny red dots on the panel of her jealousy radar. Are these people particularly interested in Little She? According to Hua Hua's past experience, most of the remaining red dots should be Yuan-Shi's other childhood sweethearts. They were her most dangerous enemies, and she would never relax her vigilance of them. Fortunately, I forced Little She to be my maid. Hua Hua patted herself on the chest. She couldn't imagine what would happen if she didn't force Yuan-Shi to inherit the great swordsmaid's inheritance. Humph, even in this situation, there are still so many girls who want to become intimate with my Little She. If they know he is a man, I can't imagine how many girls would pursue him. Yawn. Yuan-Shi suddenly had a chill in the room. He was more and more sure that danger was approaching. Anyway, I will never give my Little She to anyone. None of Yili, Phyllis, and Miley can succeed. Neither the girls of the Starwing Knights, Moo, or the Twin Witches. After targeting all the red dots on the panel of her jealousy radar, Hua Hua's eyes became firmer. The childhood sweetheart must be the final winner. No matter how many enemies she would encounter, or how strong her enemies would be, she would win the war. My ancestor, bless me. Under the waterfall of the White Lotus Sword Palace, Yuan-Shi looked surprisingly at the familiar figure standing in the pool that was almost boiling. A large number of bubbles were constantly rising from the clear and transparent pool, but none of the fish died. They were just knocked over and over by the sudden rising bubbles. Originally, it was just a simple breathing sound, but Yuan-Shi felt as if he was listening to the sound of a raging storm and the dull sound of a volcano about to erupt. She closed her eyes and stood in front of a sword that Yuan-Shi had never seen before. The handle of the sword was dark and the blade was pure white mixed with pale gold lines. Just being stabbed in the ground there, it naturally released a huge pressure on the soul. Even if ordinary people saw this sword, they would immediately feel the terrible power contained in it. Yuan-Shi realized at a glance that this was a top-ranked god weapon that normally only appeared in legends and tales. Although he knew that his childhood sweetheart was a girl who could create miracles, he still didn't believe his eyes. He hadn't seen her for a few days, and now she had obtained a god weapon? What kind of joke is this? How could such a god weapon appear in the White Lotus sword domain? The style of this sword was not at all like that of the Eastern Gods domain, but rather like the super weapons used by giants. A sword about 1.8 meters long. Would any ordinary person in the Eastern Gods domain choose to use such a long weapon? A sword that was even taller than her. Does Hua Hua like such a weapon? Nevertheless, he felt like the sword was unexpectedly matched with Hua Hua. Yuan-Shi also had similar god weapons: Water God's crown, Sailing Jellyfish's robe, and White Emperor's mask. However, he could only release their true power in the Water God's world. Because his own strength wasn't strong enough to control the true power of the three god weapons, after leaving the Water God's world, the power of the three god weapons would greatly diminish. In the outside world, he could only summon 10,000 mist souls from his mist soul army and could only summon one Water God's priestess at a time. His compatibility with these god weapons was 100%, just because his own strength wasn't strong enough, so he couldn't release their true power. However, Hua Hua was different. She had enough strength to release 100% of the power of any god weapon. Perhaps this was the biggest reason why this great sword would willingly recognize Hua Hua as its master. The more powerful the god weapons were, the more critical they were of those who would inherit them. This was common sense in the endless gods domains. If there was no suitable successor, some ancient god weapons would even wait for thousands of years and would never randomly choose a common hero-ranked person as its master. Now, Hua Hua hadn't even reached the hero rank, but already had her own god weapon. How strong is she? But for some reason, Yuan-Shi always felt a little chilly around his neck when he looked at this god weapon. It seemed that this god weapon had some kind of mild hostility towards him. Above Huahua's forehead, a green light flashed and locked on Yun Shi, as if it was telling its master, "That man who betrayed you appeared." "Oh, Yun Shi." Taking a deep breath, Huahua smiled at Yun Shi. "Little Shi, what a coincidence." "Huahua, is this your new weapon?" Yun Shi jumped to Huahua and touched the huge sword, which seemed to not be sharp at all. What surprised Yun Shi is what happened. The sword didn't look sharp at all, but just by touching the sword body, his finger had been scratched by some invisible force. "Be careful, little Shi. This sword has a bad temper." Huahua quickly pulled Yun Shi's hand back. The Dragon Emperor's sword has a terrible attack effect. It had extraordinary lethality to all kinds of fantastic creatures, gods, demons, and even nightmare creatures. This sword made of the Dragon Emperor's bones was specially forged for slaying legend-ranked beings. After the battle with Ouroboros, Huahua realized that her attack power was still not sufficient, so the first thing she did after returning to the White Lotus Sword Palace was to forge the Dragon Emperor's sword by activating an ancient contract inherited by her sky-flying bloodline. What a marvelous god weapon! Yun Shi licked the wound on his fingertip and had a preliminary understanding of the characteristics of this god weapon. Just now, his fingertip didn't really touch the body of the sword. There was a terrible invisible force that was wrapping around the sword. The moment his fingertip touched it, his fingertip had been torn apart by the invisible force. Although he wasn't a hero-ranked warrior but a real hero-ranked baker, his physical strength had long exceeded the limits of mortals. However, he was still injured. If Huahua used it to release her sky-flying sword, she could probably kill a real legend-ranked dragon in the twinkling of an eye. "This sword is prepared to defeat a strong enemy," Huahua said as the sword turned into a shadow and entered her body. It was proof that she had absolute control over the Dragon Emperor's sword. "Are you all right?" Gently pulling Yun Shi's hand, Huahua stretched out her tongue and lightly licked Yun Shi's wound. "That's all right. It was just a little scratch." Yun Shi looked at his childhood sweetheart with tender eyes. "Gentle and strong. Be aggressive and enthusiastic. Like the Queen of Summer, like the golden sun." This is his childhood sweetheart, his first love. Now, his first love was still ongoing. The Great Xia Empire, in the Great Xia Palace. "What? Someone bullied my sister?" Xia Jia, one of the most outstanding geniuses of the Great Xia Empire, the first heir of the Great Xia Empire, roared and pounded on the red iron table in his room. "Who dared bully my sister?" After receiving the report from his subordinates in the White Lotus Sword Domain, he was surprised to know that there was actually someone in that remote sword domain who dared to bully Xialing, his favorite little sister. Speaking of the White Lotus Sword Domain, he had also been there as a transfer student. This was an open secret of the Great Xia Empire. The White Lotus Sword Domain itself was not worth mentioning, but there was the White Lotus secret treasure left by Yunhai the Swordmaster there. No one knew what the real White Lotus secret treasure looked like. No one had ever seen the true White Lotus secret treasure, but the projection of the White Lotus secret treasure was real. As long as you had seen the light ball, you would instinctively be awed by this mysterious treasure. Xiajie himself also got his benefits from the projection of the true White Lotus secret treasure, which eventually let him be recognized as the first heir of the Great Xia Empire. Just like him, his sister also went to the White Lotus Sword Palace. Like him a few years ago, Xialing was also recognized as a genius in the Great Xia Empire. From childhood to childhood, Xiajie loved this sister dearly because she was the most similar to himself. Both of them were talented and willing to make the effort to improve themselves. They were far superior to other royal families of his own generation. How could anyone beat his sister in such a remote sword domain? "No, I have to go and see it with my own eyes. Whoever bullied my sister has to pay a price." The irrepressible Xiajie immediately began to order his own people, ready to go to the White Lotus Sword Domain. Not only Xiajie, but also all the ancient families began to send people to this remote sword domain through the Star Bridge, because all of them knew how special the White Lotus secret treasure was. Many people flocked to the White Lotus Sword Domain, and the local people of the White Lotus Sword domain enjoyed the most shining moments in their lives. On that day, all the people who had experienced the blessing of the White Lotus secret treasure were contested by the forces from all over the Sky Sword God's domain. Oh, you are a cook? Go with us. Since you have been blessed by the White Lotus secret treasure, you must be a great cook who can make sparkling fried rice with eggs. Oh, you're a town guard who took an arrow in the knee? That's all right. Come and marry the most beautiful girl from our family. What? Your child has also been blessed by the White Lotus secret treasure? Oh, come here, good boy. Do you want to eat sugar? If you go with us, you can eat sugar every day. For a time, all people who had been blessed by the White Lotus secret treasure became shopping rush goods. Especially those children. They had great potential. The major family forces had long parceled them out in the first several days. Not only humans, but even cats, dogs, and other animals had been robbed. The detectives of the major forces even fought for these animals. When the people of other gods' domains came, they surprisingly found that they could not even find a stray dog. In just a few days, 99% of the ordinary people living in the Sword Tip area had been recruited by various forces. Many people moved away happily, and all their remaining properties were sold at stunningly high prices. In just one night, the price of houses in the White Lotus Sword domain began to rise. Even the prices of the farthest houses had risen dozens of times. Now, even the toilets near White Lotus Sword Palace could be sold at a staggeringly high price, and most of the owners of the toilets weren't even willing to sell the toilets in this situation. If it wasn't because the White Lotus Sword Palace was the highest school in the White Lotus Sword domain, these crazy people would even buy every brick and tile of the White Lotus Sword Palace. The forces who came too late couldn't even buy a stray dog. In this situation, they moved their eyes to the disciples of the White Lotus Sword Palace. If it was unusual, even if they knew that the Sword Palace was also a strong force, the major forces of the Sky Sword God's domain wouldn't mind dividing it up by force. However, they couldn't do this. To be precise, they didn't dare do this, because that was still suspended above the White Lotus Sword Palace. Cassina the Battle God's floating ship, the Sands of Time. Cassina the Battle God. Her name was the strongest deterrence to all forces. Even the strongest family didn't dare to show any irreverence in front of Cassina. To provoke a Sky Sword was equal to seeking one's own death in the Sky Sword God's domain. Therefore, no matter what they thought, no matter how eager they were for the disciples of the White Lotus Sword Palace, all forces could only follow the common rules, using various temptations except for violence to allure the disciples of the White Lotus Sword Palace. Nevertheless, there were still innumerable subtle influences they could use. All disciples of the White Lotus Sword Palace were their targets. They were even willing to throw money at the mortals living outside of the Sword Palace, let alone the disciples of the Sword Palace. For a time, all disciples of the White Lotus Sword Palace received solicitations from countless forces. For a time, all disciples of the White Lotus Sword Palace, especially the disciples who had exposed how many sounds they had heard when the White Lotus secret treasure appeared, fell into the happiest trouble they could have. Should they go to a middle-level sword domain to marry a strong sect master's daughter, or to be an administrator of a high-level sword domain? No matter what they chose, it was like reaching the sky in a single bound to those ordinary disciples of the White Lotus Sword Palace. For Yuan Shi, his greatest worry was that as long as he got out of the Sword Palace, there would be people who got close and whispered to him, "Hello, do you want to sell your dogs? I can give you a very high price." "Not for sale. Not for sale. I won't sell any of my dogs." Looking at these people who coveted Star Thunder, Star Fire, and Star Snow, Yuan Shi had an angry facial expression. Tea in the White Lotus Sword Palace, after class. The first family of the Ghost Sword domain is recruiting. As long as you join, you will be our formal disciple, enjoying free estate, maids, servants, and everything you want. In the corridor of the Sword Palace, several foreign students from the Ghost Sword domain were handing out leaflets enthusiastically with a smile on their faces. The third princess of the Great Xia Empire is recruiting. If you want to be an officer in the Great Xia Empire, this is your best opportunity. The officer of the Great Xia Empire wore a pale golden robe and shouted with great enthusiasm. He just accompanied the third princess of the Great Xia Empire to study here. Unexpectedly, he had such a great opportunity. The army of the Great Han Sword Domain is recruiting. The more sounds you heard, the higher the treatment we can provide. You heard one sound, you can be a centurion. If you heard two sounds, you can be a chiliarch. If you heard three sounds, you can be a general. If you heard more than four sounds, you can speak to us face to face. The foreign students from the Great Han Sword Domain were also shouting loud, recruiting for the army of their sword domain. Come here, the Star Silk Alliance recruits people. We can provide all kinds of sword skills, god weapons, and various treasures to you. Our slogan is, as long as we have money, nothing will be a problem. Even the Business Alliance had begun to join in. This was the way that the major forces crowded into the White Lotus Sword Palace had come up with. Because of the existence of Cassina the battle god, they couldn't use any dirty means. Therefore, they started to lure the disciples of the Sword Palace using all kinds of temptations. If both sides thought that it was a fair deal, even Cassina the battle god couldn't do anything to stop them. Therefore, the foreign students of the White Lotus Sword Palace soon received tasks from their respective sword domains and began to wantonly recruit other students in the Sword Palace, especially those disciples who accidentally revealed how many sounds they heard when the White Lotus secret treasure appeared. Everyone became the hottest target, and for those who didn't disclose how many sounds they had heard, there were also methods for giving a vague guess. All the disciples of the White Lotus Sword Palace were listed by the major forces. At the top of the form was naturally Hua Hua, who crushed all her rivals before entering the Sword Palace, and the second was Xia Ling, the princess of the Great Xia Empire. Behind them were other hero-ranked disciples. Incidentally, Xiao Chao had also entered the top 10 list because of her performance at the Battle Gods Championship contest. All the members of the Starwing Knights were ranked very high. Hua Yu's rank was 12th in the list, which was even higher than a lot of hero-ranked old disciples. The entire Starwing Knights had long become a coveted target for all the forces from top-ranked sword domains. If it wasn't because of Cassina's deterrence, these girls would have been divvied up by all the major forces. Even the maid in the Starwing Knights, because of his 3 little puppies, was watched by many people. Every day when Yunxi went out, there would be people asking how much they could buy the 3 little puppies for. They didn't care about the money. As long as the problem could be solved with money, it wouldn't be a problem. Unfortunately, they were denied entrance at the door. How could Yunxi sell the Star Spirit team that Mayer built for himself? Not only Yunxi, none of the members of the Starwing Knights even considered the seemingly attractive conditions set forth by these forces. From Hua Yu, Xiao Chao to any of the ordinary members of the Starwing Knights, all of them refused the invitations from these forces. Are you kidding me? The Starwing Knights are May's knights. We won't leave without May's permission. Not knowing why they refused, all the representatives of the major forces were bewildered. Are you really girls from common families? Facing the solicitation of forces from top-ranked sword domains, shouldn't you catch this great opportunity to join us? What are you waiting for? We can give you a greater future and let you become the highest type of human being. There is a common rule to absorb outstanding geniuses from common families into the upper classes. Why did these village girls refuse our kindness? Are you so willing to stay in the Starwing Knights, which sounds like a knights group in a young girl's romantic dream? Are your heads broken? Or has the entire Starwing Knights already been taken by some concealed family or sect? After some investigation, they had to admit that the entire Starwing Knights may have joined a famous family. Their leader, Hua Yu's family. After all, even in the entire Western Gods domain, Hua Yu's family was one of the oldest and the most legendary one. They had to sigh for Hua Yu's good luck. Who would expect that an unknown knight group, which was formed because of their leader's romantic idea, would be so united and so lucky? Even after all the members being blessed by the White Lotus secret treasure, none of the members were willing to leave. Even so, they didn't give up trying. So the girls of the Starwing Knights were still being harassed every day by the predecessors of the White Lotus Sword Palace, which accidentally gave Yunxi some breathing room. However, in this storm, he himself, also had difficulties keeping out of the affair. May, my family likes dogs best. Would you like to come to my house with the 3 cute puppies? After being refused many times, the female disciples of White Lotus Sword Palace also learned the way to deal with Yunxi. They never mentioned their purpose of buying Star Thunder, Star Fire, and Star Snow, but focused their attention on Yunxi. I know you like dogs, and everyone likes dogs, but why are you so close? Yunxi suddenly found that he was separated from one whirlpool and involved in another. Is this a delusion? It must be a delusion. Why are the ladies of the White Lotus Sword Palace beginning to learn from the girls of the Starwing Knights? Remember, you are ladies. You should be highly cultured and steeped in propriety. So don't get so close, please. As the old saying goes, there is no impervious wall in the world. If there is a secret, then it will be leaked sooner or later. Ladies from famous families in the Sky Sword God's domain were eager to join the Starwing Knights. After using all kinds of methods, they finally knew the most important condition for joining the Starwing Knights. It was an unexpected condition, but thinking again, the condition was indeed reasonable. May, will you give me a single hair from your head? I've heard that this is a prerequisite for joining the Starwing Knights. No wonder Mei Lan always rejected my application before. Rest assured, everyone here will keep it a secret. Give me your hair, May. Looking at the girls' excited eyes and their approaching full bosoms, Yunxi felt dizzy and almost agreed. Hey, should a gentleman refuse a lady's request? Anyway, there are still a lot of seeds, and the ladies in front of me are also cultured girls from famous families. Should I give them all the remaining seeds? But if it goes on like this, will I drop hair too fast and become bald one day? May, don't be fooled. Looking at Yunxi, who almost surrendered to the girls around him, Hua Yu finally couldn't bear it and was trying to persuade him. With her superior strength and breasts, she pushed aside the girls around Yunxi, pressed her hands on Yunxi's shoulders, and said in all earnestness, May, the Starwing Knights can't be so easy to enter. Now the Starwing Knights had long not been the first small group of girls who were blessed by May. Even though she didn't expect that this small group would develop to today's level, it made the major forces in all the Sky Sword God's domain feel envious. Having truly felt the power of May's blessing, Yunxi's seed, she had regarded all the members of the Starwing Knights as her companions. They were not superiors and subordinates, but the real knights who gathered around May and fought for May. Feeling the power of blessings every day, every hour, every second, the relationship amongst everyone and May were becoming deeper and deeper. May's blessing isn't so cheap. Hua Yu glanced at the girls who thought that May's blessing was easy to obtain and didn't know how precious it really was. Their outlooks were too narrow. If people knew the true power of May's blessing, it would cause a mess that wouldn't be inferior to the great disturbance for the appearance of the White Lotus secret treasure. Hua Yu was born in the most famous family of the Night God's domain. She was certain that the rank of May's blessing was even higher than the blessing of the White Lotus secret treasure. It shared May's unlimited possibilities with all the members of the Starwing Knights. Otherwise, it was impossible to explain how these ordinary girls suddenly became geniuses in such a short time. As the leader of the Starwing Knights, except for May, she knew how many sounds every girl of the Starwing Knights had heard, which undoubtedly couldn't be announced to anyone. What's more, May's blessing wasn't a once-only use. As long as they were still around May, their talents would still slowly increase. This could be proved by her own growth. Hua Yu's White Golden Rose bloodline was one of the strongest bloodlines of the Night God's domain. All people who awakened this bloodline had become world-famous heroes in history. As the only one in the Starwing Knights who could compete with Xiao Chao, the power of her White Golden Rose bloodline had begun to show, which could be clearly seen from her hair color. Her originally golden curly hair was gradually turning to a platinum color, which was the proof of her legendary bloodline, the evidence of her talent that was constantly sublimating. May's blessing could even strengthen her White Golden Rose bloodline. And May just gave this blessing to all the members of the Starwing Knights equally? After realizing this, Hua Yu was really shocked. Only she really realized how terrible the power of this blessing was. It was a miracle that was even strong enough to break the common sense of the world. How can you understand what kind of blessing this is? In this half-tone of curiosity, I do not admit that you are eligible to join the Starwing Knights. If May really recognized you like she recognized Mumu before, I wouldn't object. However, it's obvious that your motivation is not pure. Your enthusiasm is fake. Your family and my family have a good relationship. Why do you refuse us? Please, give us a chance, said the noble girl from Li family. Her family was one of the branches of the Li family in the Great Tang Sword domain and had a good relationship with the Hua family. Hua family wasn't the first family in the White Lotus Sword domain. Yun family had a longer history than Hua family, and Xia family had the most powerful army in the White Lotus Sword domain. The Hua family in the White Lotus Sword domain was a branch of the main Hua family in the Western Gods domain. In some sense, they were still outsiders in the eyes of these local families. Because she monopolized the Starwing Knights, the girls from other families had long treated her as a thorn in the flesh. You guys, do you really think so? Hua Yu shook her head and then pulled Yunshi's hand. If you really want to join the Starwing Knights, then first, make an oath. You, from toes to hair, from body to soul, must all be May's. No matter what you encounter, no matter what you face, you must remain faithful and fight for May. Hey, this is different from what we heard. Isn't May's hair the token to join the Starwing Knights? Sworn loyalty to May? A maid? Are you kidding me? Hua Yu's words shocked the girls from the big families in the White Lotus Sword domain. Nobody expected that May's position in the Starwing Knights was so special. Isn't May just a maid? Only a small number of girls' eyes brightened up, looking at May with hot desire. Hua Yu quietly remembered the names of these girls and found that they were all from famous families. It seemed that they were aware of something and ready for it. If they could really get May's approval, Hua Yu didn't mind accepting several new members for the Starwing Knights. Apparently, even though May didn't send them her hair, there were still girls who were attracted to May. Should I say that this is how great May's charm is? In this way, the number of noble girls and civilian girls in the Starwing Knights can also be balanced slightly. Thank you, Hua Yu. I really didn't know what to do right then. She breathed a sigh of relief and thanked Hua Yu, who saved him from the siege. May, you have to be more confident and refuse when it's time to refuse. Those who don't know how to refuse others will not become great people. Hua Yu took Yunshi's hand, and they sat together on the bench under the shade of the tree, like a beautiful landscape painting, which caused many disciples who passed by to look sideways frequently. You are the one who has changed our destiny. Without you, there would be no Starwing Knights. The Starwing Knights were born because of you. Please take responsibility. Hey, why does it feel like I'm being preached to by my wife? Yunshi wondered at the blonde girl sticking to his side. Initially, when he met with her, as well as Xiao Chao, Mei Lan, Ling Ling, and other girls in the Starwing Knights, it was only by chance that he went to take the Sword Palace entrance exam. Because he wanted to bless these girls who struggled for their own destiny, and to test his newly obtained ability, he gave them his seed. At that time, he really didn't expect that there would be a small miracle called the Starwing Knights. In this small girl knights group, which had only a few dozens of members, there were girls from famous families such as Hua Yu, and civilian geniuses such as Xiao Chao. There were careless girls like Ling Ling, and also careful girls such as Mei Lan. As time went by, these girls from different places, who had never known each other before, became a closely connected group, just like a big family. She looked at the threads between himself and Hua Yu, and all the members of the Starwing Knights. Today, these seeds, as always, continued to convey to him the experience of the girls, sharing their secrets. In contrast, his own seed also fed back his growth to them to enhance their talents and potential. The connection between his seeds and their seeds were like a net connecting all the people in the Starwing Knights, and he was in the center of the net. He was the only one at the core that could receive the strong support of all the Starwing Knights at the same time. As long as he was in this network, everyone would benefit a lot. This was the greatest gift from the stars to him, the foundation of his growing strength. It was only now that he realized that the net was not only a net to enhance his strength, but also enhanced something else. Huayu, Xiao Xiao, Ling Ling, Mei Lan, Lu Lu. The experience he received from them was obviously more than that of the other girls in the Starwing Knights. Under the principle of equivalent exchange, the experience they received from Yunshi's seed was also more than that of other girls. If thread could be regarded as a relationship, then the relationship between them and Yunshi was deepening, and even the color of the thread seemed to have changed slightly. I never heard of this evolutionary direction. Yunshi found that he had woven the web, but he himself was also caught in the network called the Starwing Knights. Your blessings are very, very precious. May, please cherish the opportunity to send your best wishes in the future. I don't refuse seeing more girls joining the Starwing Knights, but please, choose the girls who deserve your blessing. They can be common people who don't have super talents like Moo and Robin, but they can't be shallow ladies from noble families. If you really want to choose new members, then I'll recommend them to you. It was not selfish for Huayu to recommend the girls she knew. For Mei, who was bound to have a great future, the initial team was very important. The girls she wanted to recommend were not only beautiful and well-behaved, but also were the ones who were really attracted by Mei. In addition, they all had the same characteristics, that was, because of good nutrition and excellent exercise from childhood, their bodies were perfect, and the size of their breasts was far above average. Well, that was the criterion for Huayu to choose new members. Whoever can't even reach the standard figure has no chance of joining the Starwing Knights. The multi-headed demon dragon's blood was just a slim, unrealistic hope. The real talent is actually visible and tangible. Instead of pursuing unrealistic hope, Huayu preferred to recruit new members who had shown their talents. After all, Mei really likes big tits, doesn't she? I see. In the future, I will consider the candidates of the Starwing Knights carefully. After being preached to by Huayu, Yunshi surrendered by raising both hands. To discuss the size of breasts, the age of marriage, whether or not they have sisters, and the situations of their families, it was too shameful for Yunshi. Huayu, how many people have you investigated? How can you know their interests, hobbies, and even the size of their breasts clearly? What a terrible action force it is. The leader of the Starwing Knights is too terrible. So, Mei, how many more people can you give your blessings to? All of a sudden, Huayu asked a crucial question. Oh, there are still dozens of. Yunshi covered his mouth. Wow, I almost spoke my biggest secret out. Although Huayu thought that it was a kind of blessing, the number of seeds was still the greatest secret he had. So much. Huayu was shocked. She personally felt how powerful Mei's blessing was. In her eyes, even if Mei could only give one person this blessing, it could be regarded as a miracle. The fact that Mei gave all the members of the Starwing Knights her blessings had surpassed the common sense of the world in Huayu's eyes, which also made her more grateful to Mei. If she hadn't met Mei, her white golden rose bloodline would not have been awakened. Her future would probably be just to marry a family in the Western God's domain, which was an inevitable fate of common descendants of the Hua family. It was with Mei's blessing that she could awaken her bloodline, obtaining the power to change her destiny. Her gratitude to Mei was far beyond what could be described by words. Mei's blessing was like a key to open the door of the new world, which made her enter a more colorful world. That is to say, your remaining blessings can even create new Starwing Knights? Huayu urgently wanted to know how many miracles Mei could still create. Well, probably, Yunshi sighed. Now that the secret was exposed, it was no longer a secret. Huayu thought that they were blessings. It wasn't wrong. He couldn't tell anyone that they were actually his seeds, which could only be bred by the will of the stars. Even the battle god seed he obtained from his teacher, Cassina the battle god, was essentially just a crystallization of energy, while Yunshi's seed could enhance a person's talent and potential and would continue to grow with his own growth. This power was even beyond the legend rank. It was the greatest gift of the stars to the newborn star child. Perhaps the initial seed may not be strong enough, but the growth potential of this power system was infinite. Share and spread his own seeds, and then get infinite power from the seeds that spread out. This was the miracle that the stars had created for Yunxi. Hua was sword skill talent, the twin witches' mentality, Hua Yu and Xiao Chao's fighting talent, Mumu's diamond body. The practice experience from all the members of the Starwing Knights. The more seeds he shared, the stronger Yunxi was. The more he used this ability, the more he could feel. This ability is too powerful, so let others think it is a blessing. Mei, you are really great. It was a real surprise to know that Mei's remaining blessings could create new Starwing Knights. She thought that Mei couldn't use her blessings too many times at first. Now, she needed to change her plan. Mei can indeed create miracles. Well, in this case, I think I need to revise the plan. Actually, there are also some good girls I didn't mention before. As the leader of the Starwing Knights, how could she turn a blind eye to talented girls? The reason she didn't mention them just now was because she estimated that the remaining blessings Mei could use wouldn't be too many, so she only chose those big tits, noble girls. However, there were not many big tits, noble girls in the Sword Palace originally, and after her selection, there were very few candidates. If she ignored the requirement of big tits, they were indeed a lot of talented but flat-chested civilian girls. Since Mei had more blessings than she had expected, then she could also give these civilian girls an opportunity. How do you know so clearly? Yunxi was shocked. Originally, Hua Yu not only knew the information of noble girls well, but also knew the information of civilian girls clearly. From their birthplace to the sword skills they were good at, their heights, weights, and even whether they had marriage contacts. She collected all the girls' information. The leader of the Starwing Knights was too terrible. I have my secret channel, said Hua Yu. Under her large and snow-white right breast, an amber-colored holy beetle was firmly attached to the soft and smooth skin. Well, choosing this holy beetle as my servant is too convenient. 13 people. They were the final candidates Hua Yu chose to be the new members of the Starwing Knights. For this, she had collected the information of almost all the disciples in the White Lotus Sword Palace. What they had in common was that all of them had applied for membership of the Starwing Knights, and all of them had a special feeling for Mei. In other words, they were the girls with the symptoms of Mei poisoning. From this point of view, they had the qualifications to become new members of the Starwing Knights. Without this advantage, even a genius like Xiaoling, the princess of the Great Xia Empire, couldn't join the Starwing Knights. After all, the full name of the Starwing Knights was Mei's Starwing Knights. Did I make a terrible mistake? Looking at the information of the alternate members sent by Hua Yu, Yunxi's headache grew worse and worse. 4 noble girls from 4 families in different gods' domains. Well, this was actually a feature of the Endless Gods Domain era. Even before the age of the Star Bridges, the families at the top of their respective gods' domains had known that no one should put all of their eggs into the same basket. At their height, they would make the worst-case scenario plans for their families in advance. Before the first Star Bridge was built, they would spread the families' branches all over their gods' domains, and even change the names of the branches of their families, leaving only the most secret inheritance. In this way, even if the main family was involved in unpredictable disasters and was totally destroyed, the family would always have a way to continue, until the day when the family's glory could be restored. After the Star Bridges were built and entered the Endless Gods Domains era, these big families had brought this practice to the extreme, not only in the gods' domains where they lived, but also in the most remote gods' domains. They would settle their branches there, opening up new lands. Because there were more opportunities in the new gods' domains, some frustrated children of their families would even voluntarily apply to start new family branches in these remote gods' domains. It must be said that these ancient families do have their own unique way of survival. At this moment, the 4 candidates of the Starwing Knights were from 4 different gods' domains. They were all from the Western Gods domain, but their families had branches in the White Lotus Sword domain, and they had a good friendship with Hua Yu's family. It was because of this that they knew what earth-shaking changes have taken place inside of Hua Yu's body, and what an amazing miracle the legendary Mei's blessing was. As for Hua Yu's recruiting them into the Starwing Knights, wasn't only because they had big tits, but also because they had sharp observational skills, excellent talent, clear world outlook, coupled with a keen sense of new trends, they were worthy of being White Lotus Sword Domain's most outstanding elites in all senses. If it hadn't been for the sudden rise of the Starwing Knights, they would have been the proudest disciples of the White Lotus Sword Palace. After the White Lotus secret treasure appeared, they also received invitations from various forces, but none of them said yes. They were waiting for an answer from the Starwing Knights. Which god's domain? Night God's domain. Yunshi looked at the list in his hand. Among the 4 candidates, 3 were from the Night God's domain, where Hua Yu's main family was located. The Night God's domain was a super god's domain even in all the Western gods' domains. Known as the Sword of the Western Gods domain, it had a large number of legendary knights whose history could be traced back to the most ancient era. The remaining one was from the mysterious Witch God's domain, which was a special god's domain famous for various witches there. In that god's domain, the desire for bloodline power transcended everything. It was the homeland of all witches. Why did a witch come to the Sky Sword God's domain and stay in the small White Lotus Sword domain? She suddenly had a feeling that it was probably because the small White Lotus Sword domain was unusual. Recalling all the things he had experienced, none of them would normally happen in such a small sword domain. Moreover, according to the information provided by Hua Yu, it seemed that the 3 ladies from the Night God's domain and the witch had formed a small group and run a shop called Knights and Magic on the street outside the White Lotus Sword Palace. This shop often sold rare magic handicrafts and fine weapons from the Western Gods domain and had something of a reputation in the sword tip area. Now, because house prices in the sword tip area had risen incredibly, the price of their small shop had also risen hundreds of times. Apart from this, they were still disciples studying in the White Lotus Sword Palace. Because of this, countless forces enthusiastically recruited them, and even their families had asked them to return to the Western Gods domain. However, the 4 of them all chose to refuse, neither to sell the Knights and Magic shop on the street, nor to accept orders from their families to leave, but have been awaiting an answer from the Starwing Knights. Why are they so persistent? The Starwing Knights is only a temporary group of girls. Yunshi looked at their information and felt a little headache. In his mind, he was somewhat impressed by this small group called Knights and Magic. Among the noble ladies of the White Lotus Sword domain, the 4 often gathered together for tea. He remembered that 3 of them were always armed in armor, and there was always a little girl with a broomstick and pointed hat following behind them. So, she's not such a little girl. Yunshi looked at the papers. Witches didn't represent their appearance according to age, but shaped their appearance according to their magic power. Special note: the main characteristics of witches are their breasts. The stronger the magic power they had, the larger their breasts were. The oldest witch was also the woman who had the largest breasts in the world. Generally, not all descendants of witches could awaken their witch bloodline. Therefore, even in the witch god's domain, the number of witches wasn't too great. Rose was the name of the little witch candidate of the Starwing Knights. She was still small, but had shown extraordinary potential. Hua Yu's note: P.S. The size of her breasts is hidden by magic. They are much bigger than what they actually look like. So how do you even know such things so vividly, Hua Yu? Yunshi was totally speechless about Hua Yu's intelligence-gathering ability. The Knights and Magic group had their tactics. When they hunted monsters, the 3 knights were Rose's guards and Rose's magic was the attack method. The 4 of them all had the potential to enter the hero rank. Especially Rose, because her witch bloodline had been awakened, she had a 100% probability of entering the hero rank. In that small group, she was the core and the 3 knights were her shields. She was their sword attacking with extraordinary force. Of course, if many humans thought that witches were weak and dared to do anything to them, they wouldn't even have time to regret. Witches' magic would teach them what true power was. Why do you want to join the Starwing Knights? She pulled Rose's hand and felt the soft, warm hand, asking curiously. Because. May's body no, your body. Smells good. Rose hesitated for a moment, but still told the truth. Besides, maize bread is delicious. Who gave you bread? She quickly scanned several suspects in his mind, and finally locked his target on the leader of the Starwing Knights. Yu. It's not right to tempt a young girl with bread. A gentleman wouldn't do this. Oh, Yu is a lady, not a gentleman. You're too young to join the Starwing Knights. Yunshi felt that if he agreed to the child's application, he would not be able to be a gentleman the rest of his life. Clearly, she is 16 years old, the same age as himself. Why do I feel guilty when I hold her little hand? She's 16 years old. 16 years old. 16 years old. In a lot of God's domains, it's the legal age to marry and have children. Yunshi constantly reminded himself in his heart. But Mumu is younger than me? Rose looked at Yunshi with some impertinence, launching a fatal blow to Yunshi's excuse. Oh, Yunshi remembered that Mumu had also joined the Starwing Knights. Her age was younger than Rose, and she was still taking basic knowledge courses with the Twin Witches. No, now I can't use age as an excuse. Well then, should I let her join? Actually, her witch bloodline is already a sufficient excuse to let her join. Well, I want to join, and they're with me. Although she was small, Rose was actually the core of the small group, Knights and Magic. She looked at Yunshi with expectations, and her small animal-like eyes made Yunshi's heart soften. I'll give you bread, and you give it up. Joining the Starwing Knights is not all good. As a knight, we may encounter dangerous things in the future. Yunshi really didn't want to commit a crime. Looking at Rose's tiny body and her small chest, he felt a very bad itch in his heart. If Yu's information is correct, Rose's flat chest is actually a disguise. It's hard to imagine. No matter how I observe her, she is just a little girl. Is this a genius of witches? Danger is a strong motivation that can let me improve myself. We are working hard to become stronger, so we are not afraid of dangers. Rose stretched out her finger with magical light on her fingertips. I want to learn more. I want to master stronger magic missiles. So, I must join the Starwing Knights. Well, I know you like magic missiles very much. Looking back on Rose's information provided by Yu, Yunshi understood. This girl, once she has a goal, she will never give it up. It's not just me. Lancelot, Mordred, and Alexander want to join the Starwing Knights too. We swore an oath that we will be a team forever. Rose looked at Yunshi with confidence. She seemed to be absolutely confident about their qualifications to join the Starwing Knights. Yunshi couldn't help but read the information provided by Yu again. This time, he read the three Night Girls' information carefully. Lancelot, good at swords, axes, and lances. She was the team's brain, and her class was Paladin. Mordred, good at two-handed swords and all kinds of heavy weapons. She was the most powerful attacker in the team, and her class was Berserker. Alexander was a great rider and the support staff of the team. She was the only rider in the team. These three names were said to be legendary heroes in the Western Gods domain who had left great achievements in history. Numerous parents named their children in their names, especially in the Night Gods domain. Amongst every 10 teenagers, there would be 2 Lancelots and 1 Alexander. But to name their daughters this? Oh, their parents must be serious knight enthusiasts. Unlike Yu, who changed her name after coming to the White Lotus Sword domain. They used their original names in the Night Gods domain. If only looking at these 3 names, Yunshi would have thought they were all energetic young boys. Looking further, Yunshi received more detailed information, as well as the test for entering the Starwing Knights. Hunting mutant green hippos? Looking at the familiar name and a huge green hippo picture, Yunshi's hunter's soul was burning. This green hippo was obviously different from ordinary green hippos. Its huge nostrils, big fangs, and ugly lines on the skin all reminded him that it was a mutant creature. Moreover, the hunting place was not at a swamp or nearby a river, where the habitats of ordinary green hippos were. It was at the seashore. This is a green hippo that can live in the sea. It's so rare and strange. Yes, let's go hunting for the green hippo and bring back its teeth, tail, and meat. Little Rose had courage far beyond her stature. Since this was the test for joining the Starwing Knights, then she would do her best. She wanted to say something, but finally said nothing and nodded. Well, recently, Teacher Casina was still drunk in Hydra's wine cellar. It's not a bad idea to follow the small group, observing their hunting. Perhaps they really had the qualifications to join the Starwing Knights. Well, then go. Rose raised her broomstick excitedly and marched forward, then was tripped by the hem of her robe and fell to the ground violently. She quickly caught the little witch in his arms in case that she hit the ground. There was a feeling on his fingertips that was heavy. It was not the flat feeling when he hugged Moo Moo. It's true. This witch's chest is very big. For some reason, the information he read before appeared in his mind. Whoa. Being hugged by Shi, Rose was so shy that her body huddled up all over. Her broad robe covered her body like a single sheet, and her little face under her pointed hat had long turned red. Thank you. It was not much louder than a mosquito's noise. If Rose could choose, she would have created a magic space and hid inside of that space for 24 hours. Don't worry, you're still small. She habitually touched the little witch's head, but the feeling just now still remained on his fingertips. That touch, that softness. Hua Yu's information wasn't wrong. This little magic girl does have a body completely inconsistent with her small body. But why did she hide it with magic and keep it a secret? No one could tell what she really looked like from her current appearance. And how did Hua Yu know this secret? Even Shi, who felt it with his fingers personally, just now, was still wondering if it was just his imagination. I'm not small. Rose put her arms around her chest as if she was a puppy who pretended to be ferocious. Indeed, they are not small at all. The stronger a witch is, the bigger her breasts would be. If this is true, then, what an amazing genius. Shi confirmed once again that Rose was probably the first genius which he had encountered. On the street outside the Sword Palace, in front of a small shop, 3 young female knights who had arrived early saw the little witch's pointed hat and raised their hands together. Rose, this way, this way. Rose, don't go the wrong way. Be quick. Come here. Here. It does seem that she often loses her way. She looked suspiciously at the little witch who was holding his hand. No. It's just because you're too tall. Rose hated her knight team. She didn't admit that she had no sense of direction. It was just because there were too many people taller than her, which blocked her sight. Yes, it's not her fault. It's the world's fault. Why is everyone so tall? She looked at the 3 knight girls over there, and their information naturally appeared in his mind. Lancelot was a 17-year-old paladin and was sent to the White Lotus Sword domain at a very young age. Wearing knight's armor, her full breasts slightly pushed open the chest armor to both sides, revealing the unshielded jade-like skin in it. She was a standard Western beauty with blonde hair and blue eyes, and looked a little more mature than her age. It was said that she was good at all weapons, but the most used one was the combination of sword and shield. Mordred had the same blonde hair, but her eyes were slightly red. Her weapons were a 2-handed sword and a huge tower shield. She was also the tallest amongst the 3, about 1.8 meters tall. Although she was a knight, she had Berserker bloodline. Even in the Night God's domain, Berserker bloodline was pretty rare. Behind them were caravans especially prepared for hunting. A pair of vigorous horses were beating their noses and kicking their hooves. They were awaiting their departure in full spirit. The combination of paladin, berserker, and rider seemed strange, but that was the feature of knights and magic. This team had made many achievements in the past year, and was also one of the top-ranked mortal adventure teams registered in the Sky Tower. It was precisely because they were so excellent that Hua Yu agreed to let them do the entrance test. Rose, haven't you lost your way? Lancelot's first sentence had made the little witch cry. I am not a kid, because everyone is too tall. Rose, you were too slow. I almost want to look for you. Mordred didn't pay attention to the others' moods. Her words gave Rose the second blow. Rose, do you take handkerchiefs and bread with you? Alexander's words gave Rose's heart the final blow. I am a witch, not a kindergarten child. Rose was desperate. She's 16, not 6. What's more, lost her way. She only lost her way once or twice and 10 times at most. After all, the knowledge of witches was completely useless for her to find ways in the city. Thank you, May. Thank you for agreeing to hold the entrance test. Lancelot smiled at Yuan-shi after she teased Rose. We will show our strength to you. Even if the green hippo hides under the water, I will catch it and kill it. Mordred promised. Please give us your constructive criticism, May. Alexander approached Yuan-shi curiously, wrinkling her nose with her knowing and burning eyes. The scent of good wine. May, do you like to drink too? No, I get drunk easily. I can't drink more than 3 cups of wine per day. That was the truth. Although Hydra said that Yuan-shi could drink 3 cups of her poisonous wine per day, he actually only drank a cup per day in the secret room where the light ball was. He had to hide. If his teacher Cassina knew about it, he could imagine his miserable end of being imprisoned by his teacher. Only 3 cups? What kind of wine can you get drunk with in 3 cups? Alexander had a keen sense of smell. She was sure that the wine fragrance on May was a new wine she didn't know about at all. This unknown wine, even with just a hint of fragrance left, it had made her stomach growl. Is that wine so good, Alexander? Lancelot also came up and looked at Yuan-shi curiously. Her nose wasn't as good as Alexander's, but she also liked good wines. As for Mordred, there was no need to mention it. She had berserker bloodline. Naturally, berserkers liked wines. In stories, berserkers would even wage a war for drinking. The money that Knight and Magic earned, apart from the money being used to buy magic materials for Rose, were all taken by Alexander to buy wines. Drinking was the hobby of all the members, apart from Rose, of the Knights and Magic group. Although Rose was 16 years old, in their eyes, she was still a child, and children can only drink juice. Yes, my nose can't be mistaken. It's a wine I've never tried before. Alexander's eyes brightened up and gazed at Yuan-shi with excitement. Her flaxen ponytail flicked from side to side because of excessive excitement. What kind of wine is this? More fierce than agave, wilder than whiskey. Even the best brandy is not as pure as this is. Why? I've never smelled this kind of wine before. It's clear that it isn't any of the wine sold in the whole of the White Lotus Sword domain. Well, indeed. It isn't the wine of the White Lotus Sword domain, but something brewed by a god. Looking at Alexander's excited face, Yuan-shi was under tremendous pressure. He forgot that even though he was drinking alone in the secret room that no one could find, there was still a little smell of Hydra's poisonous wine left on his body. Unexpectedly, there was actually someone with such a sharp nose in the world. She could deduce so many things from such a little wine fragrance. Where can I buy this wine, May? Alexander came close to Yuan-shi, and the elastic peaks on her chest pressed on Yuan-shi's chest, making him a bit out of breath. Well, this? I don't know. It's not a lie. Of course, Hydra's poisonous wine isn't being sold anywhere. And I only drank a small cup of wine. Alexander's face turned so depressed. She found a wine she had never smelled before, but she didn't even know where she could buy it. Oh my God. Why is the world so cruel to me? That's all right. As long as you remember the smell, you will be able to taste it one day. Lancelot comforted her. Yes, for the sake of wine, I wouldn't mind walking to the end of the world. In an instant, Alexander had a whole new purpose in life. She raised her head and threw out her chest. I'm Alexander, who collects all the good wines. I said, I really don't know where to buy this wine. Yes, yes. Next time I meet the merchant who sells this wine, I'll leave a cup. No, a bucket for you. Well, stop smelling. It's embarrassing. Until he got into the chariot and left the street in the sword tip area, Yuan-shi had to repeat this conversation many times. Oh my God. Why is there such a knight with such a sharp nose? I just drank a cup of Hydra's wine in the secret room, and now I have to give her 100 promises. What's more, Alexander, Mordred, and Lancelot all looked at him with their eyes shining. It was too stressful. Well, wine is not good at all. If I am drunk, I can't use my magic missiles. Finally, It was Angel Rose who saved you and she. As the only underage girl in Knights and Magic, Rose, again, I'm 16, she really didn't understand why the three knights in the team liked wine so much. Well, let's talk about that unfortunate green hippo. Alexander had to change the topic unwillingly. According to intelligence, this green hippo has been active for a while. It often appears in this area, and this area. Lancelot took out a map and began to work out the hunting plan. What weapon does it use? Still a wooden stick? Mordred licked her lips with an eager look. No, this green hippo has a significantly higher IQ than other green hippos. Its weapon is a giant stone club, which should be a kind of natural obsidian it found in the sea. Lancelot quickly drew a giant stone club on the paper with a pin. More than that, she also drew the green hippo's outline onto the paper and carefully drew a human nearby it as a comparison. It's about 5 meters tall, weighing more than a few tons. It has the ability to dive into the seabed and has a ferocious personality, so I don't recommend attacking it in the sea. The best plan is to trap it on the ground with Rose's magic missiles to kill it. Not only did Lancelot have excellent painting skills, but her strategic thinking ability was also first-rate. She quickly worked out a general plan for the team. The best place to set traps is on this shoal. I've prepared a large chain trigger trap that can instantly create a big pit. It's only a matter of time until we kill the green hippo, as long as we block its way of escape to the sea. This was the first time she joined a team of hunting large monsters. He looked at Lancelot with great curiosity and carefully recorded her plan. It was almost impossible for ordinary people in the White Lotus Sword domain to encounter such a horrible monster. But once you saw such a monster, it normally meant a coming disaster. Any third-ranked monster could easily destroy a small town overnight. If it was a hero-ranked monster like the male fiery dragon Yuan she saw before, it could even destroy a country. Magic is the embodiment of wisdom. It cannot tolerate any mistakes. For the apprentice magicians, they need to give their whole attention to the release of any magic. Once a magic model is wrong, magic regurgitation could easily kill them. This kind of thing never happens to the witches. Once they are born and have opened their eyes, they are naturally immersed in the sea of mana, naturally learn how to absorb the mana from the air, and naturally resonate with their witch bloodline. Witches would never be exposed to magic regurgitation. Even if their magic was forcibly interrupted by an enemy, it would only deplete their mana but wouldn't cause any damage to their bodies. Not only that, when witches are in high spirits, the power of their magic would increase significantly because of the blood resonance effect. If they were facing a desperate situation or if their emotions were in an extreme state, the magic they could release would even be far beyond the limit of their rank. In the history of Witch God's domain, there was a mortal ranked witch who performed a legend-ranked magic spell because of crushing despair. On the night of her marriage, a war broke out and she lost her lover. She opened the door of the taboo by offering herself as a sacrifice in despair. Overnight, monsters emerged from that door and ruined the entire country. This was the power of the witch bloodline. That was why Lancelot, Mordred, and Alexander all cheered for Rose before they went hunting monsters. As long as Rose was in high spirits, her magic power would rise sharply. Even if there were 10 green hippos, she could easily handle them. Well, this green hippo is dead. By looking at Rose's proud face, Lancelot knew that there wouldn't be an accident this time. A mutant green hippo is nothing in front of Rose when she is in such an excited mood. About 3 hours later, they arrived at their destination, a corner of the wilderness in the Swordbody area. Splash, splash. The seawater beat against the uneven rocks, stirring up froth all over. She sat alone on a coconut tree about 10 meters tall, looking at the knights and magic team that had been ambushed hundreds of meters away. Like the most standard formation in the textbook, the 3 knights protected the little witch in a triangular formation. No attack from any direction could surpass the defense of the 3. As for Rose, she was meditating with her eyes closed. Only then could she really feel that this little witch was not a spoiled young lady, but an excellent hunter who had experienced all kinds of battles with the three knights. There were no wars in the White Lotus sword domain. Therefore, exploring the sword body area, hunting monsters in the wilderness, or searching for treasures were the most common tasks of the adventure teams in this remote sword domain. When Yunshi was a child, he also occasionally dreamed of such a free life. But the reality is that the mortal world does not need such a strong adventure team. The people who had this strength usually went into the military or became the gatekeepers of big families. Only in the sword tip area did these teams with extraordinary strength have meaning for any existence. Boom, boom, boom. From the sea, there was a sudden, unnatural noise of bombs. It's coming. Get ready. Let's perform Plan 1. Lancelot took a deep breath and grabbed a white pebble up from the beach. The huge figure of the green hippo emerged little by little from the sea. The green hippo was taller and stronger than Lancelot's sketch. Its skin was covered with patterns that ordinary green hippos didn't have, and the giant stone club in its hand was mosaicked with many strange crystal fragments. Strange. It's not the same as in the intelligence report? Alexander frowned. The green hippo's information provided by the Hunters Guild was very different from what the real green hippo was they saw with their own eyes. Looks like this guy's a little bigger than we thought. Mordred compared her two-handed sword with the height of the green hippo and affirmed that the green hippo was absolutely over 4 meters tall, much larger than what they were told. The situation has changed. Let's perform Plan 2. It was very common that problems arose during hunting, and Lancelot was naturally prepared for this. Anything could happen in the wilderness. It wasn't surprising to meet a hero-ranked monster when a team was hunting a common monster in the wilderness. At least, even though the green hippo's size got bigger and its weapon looked stronger, it was still a green hippo and hadn't become anything else. As long as it was still a green hippo, Rose could kill it. Her attack power was far beyond the mortal rank and approached the hero rank. The original plan was to lure the green hippo into the trap and then let Rose attack it with her magic missile. Now the plan has changed. I'm going to attract the green hippo's attention. You take Rose back. Lancelot rushed out without hesitation and threw the white pebble at the green hippo from 100 meters away. The effect of the white pebble was instant. The green hippo was provoked and burst into a rage and rushed towards Lancelot at a roaring pace. Combination. Lancelot used an incredible way to assemble her sword and shield into a strange hammer. With flexible steps, Lancelot rushed to the angry green hippo and skipped around to the green hippo's back. Boom! The green hippo hit the ground with the stone club, making a big hole in the ground and splashing numerous gravel about. Lancelot firmly grasped the hammer in her hand, swung it, and gave the green hippo's body a powerful hammer blow. Bang! The hammer struck the green hippo's thick skin and made a muffled sound. No, the hammer can't hurt it. Lancelot dropped the hammer directly and pulled out a bayonet from her waist and rolled over on the ground. The green hippo held its giant stone club in both hands and slashed at her. Lancelot dodged the attack and held the bayonet specially made for armor piercing, instantly piercing the green hippo's body like dozens of swords. The attacks were still ineffective. There were only a few white spots on the green hippo's thick skin, which couldn't be found without careful observation. Roar! The green hippo roared, and the sand around it was in an explosion. It rose and floated in a circle in the air. Mortal-ranked physical attacks are invalid. Rose, use your biggest magic missile. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.